Chapter 3375. In the blink of an eye, Arbor flicked the purple talisman in his hand out. Everyone only saw a streak of light streak across the sky before the talisman suddenly exploded in front of Mu Rochuan. It was so fast that it was almost too much for the eyes to take in. Rumbling thunder and lightning streamed down from the sky. Mu Rochuan didn't panic either. With a calm expression, she also built 4 defensive walls around herself. After the defensive talisman was activated, her entire body was wrapped in the defensive walls. Even a strand of her hair was wrapped in it. She gazed coldly at Xiaomu across from her through the transparent defensive wall, a sneer on her lips. Could it be that a small lightning talisman was delusional enough to think it could break through her defensive walls? What a joke. The lightning talisman she made couldn't break through the defensive talisman her big brother drew, because her big brother was helping Arbor. Taking 10,000 steps back, the lightning talisman Arbor threw out should have been drawn with her big brother's help. Her big brother only had 2 more lightning talismans than her, so he might not be able to break through her defensive talisman. Moreover, there was only 1 lightning talisman. Mu Rochuan's lips curled into a cold sneer. Arbor, so what if big brother helps you? At most, we're equal in strength. I can't do anything to you, but you can't do anything to me? Mu Rochuan's line of sight seemed to be filled with dazzling purple-red lightning. A strange scene appeared in front of her. As the first lightning bolt fell, more and more lightning bolts seemed to crazily squeeze out of the void and smash towards her body. Mu Rochuan had already sensed that something was amiss when the spiritual lightning landed on her body. This lightning bolt was really a bit fierce. He smashed his head against his own defensive wall, creating a large hole in the transparent defensive wall in front of him. Terrifying lightning bolts desperately squeezed in through the crack. As soon as they touched her body, the electricity surged into her body, making her hands and feet feel cold. She once again experienced the painful feeling of being struck by lightning. Arbor! Mu Rochuan angrily roared, her eyes bursting with needle-like poisonous light. Yet Xiaomu merely cast her a cold glance. She didn't budge from her spot, and merely watched as that spiritual thunder talisman completely enveloped her body. At this moment, everyone present was shocked. Naturally, everyone had seen the purple lightning talisman that the little crown princess had thrown out. Even though it was a purple talisman, there was only 1 of it. Even though it was powerful, it probably wouldn't last for long. Moreover, eldest Miss Mu had several defensive talismans in front of her to protect her. She should be fine. Unexpectedly, after the purple talisman was activated, a lightning cloud floated above Mu Rochuan's head. Just like that, with the supreme power of lightning, it fiercely smashed down on her body. What was even more shocking was that eldest Miss Mu couldn't even withstand the little crown princess' first bolt of spiritual lightning. The defensive wall had clearly cracked. At the same time, Mu Rochuan had no other choice but to throw out a few more defensive talismans to fill the cracks in the defensive wall in front of her. However, what was shocking was that the second defensive wall that Mu Rochuan had just released actually crumbled into pieces under the crackling of the 2 bolts of spiritual lightning. In the blink of an eye, Mu Rochuan's pupils fiercely shrank. With a flick of her fingers, 5 defensive talismans flew out and built 5 transparent defensive walls in front of her. However, what made people despair was that the lightning talisman's power was fierce. Chapter 3376. Just as the defensive wall was about to be completed, a bolt of spirit lightning struck down and shattered it with a loud bang. 9 bolts of spiritual lightning. Mu Yuanyuan tightly grasped Mu Lixiang's small hand and cried out excitedly, 9 bolts! 9 bolts of spiritual lightning! Mu Lixiang's eyes also emitted a strange light as she stared intently at the battle between the little crown princess and Mu Rochuan, her blood boiling. Heavens! Sure enough, the little crown princess's performance was unexpected, yet also reasonable. She displayed her powerful talisman skills to everyone. She knew it. She knew it. The little crown princess talisman skills were definitely superior to everyone in the Mu family. Her talisman crafting technique was obviously not on the same level as the talisman crafting techniques of all the Mu clan disciples. If the little crown princess was willing to give her a few pointers, she believed that her talisman skills would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. 9 bolts of spiritual lightning. No, it was already 10 bolts of spiritual lightning. After being bombarded by 10 bolts of spiritual lightning, the defensive wall on Mu Rochuan's body completely crumbled. Although Mu Rochuan was frightened, her expression was still very calm. The defensive talismans she drew in yesterday's preliminaries were nearly used up. She could only activate a speed talisman on her body, and madly dashed on the stage to avoid the spiritual lightning that came crashing down. Mu Jingfeng's eyes had already narrowed into slits at this time. He stared at the small figure on the stage with shock and some greed, his eyes gazing longingly at the spiritual lightning hovering in the air. What kind of talisman inheritance was this? Throughout their entire Mu family, there had never been such a powerful talisman skill, right? At this very moment, everyone in the Mu family was very shocked as they watched this battle. The little crown princess seemed to be suppressing eldest young Miss Mu with an absolute advantage. Eldest young Miss's current appearance was extremely wretched. She quickly moved around the contest ring to avoid the thundercloud above her. However, no matter how fast she ran, there was only so much space. No matter where she ran, the thunderclouds would follow her like gangrene. Her ankles and elbows were almost hit several times, causing her to be at a loss of what to do. Mu Qingya stood up from her seat and looked at her daughter in shock. She clenched her brocade handkerchief tightly in her hand. At this time, the disciples of the Mu family below had already let out waves of incredulous cries. 15 bolts of spiritual lightning. How is that possible? Even a top-grade Thunder Spirit talisman can only release 12 bolts of spiritual lightning. What's going on? Oh my god, is the little crown princess trying to defy the heavens? How could a tiny lightning spirit talisman contain 15 bolts of lightning? 15? 16? Someone immediately said, trembling with fear. The group of Mu family's children all looked at the little crown princess, with a look of looking at a monster. This isn't the lightning spirit talisman that we know of. Mu Yuanyuan cried out in excitement. Mu Lixiang also hurriedly nodded and shouted, "What kind of lightning spirit talisman is this?" Lightning continued to roll down, and there were already 20 bolts of spiritual lightning. Meanwhile, on the stage, Mu Rochuan had already exhausted all of her talismans. At this time, she was still running around the stage in a sorry state, jumping and jumping as she rapidly dodged the lightning bolts descending from the sky. Chapter 3377. Moreover, she had already broken the rules. While activating her defensive spiritual weapon, she began to use her spiritual power to escape the bombardment of the lightning bolts. She couldn't care so much now, and felt that preserving her life was more important. It wasn't that she didn't try to escape from the stage earlier. It was just that the lightning bolts had built a high wall around the stage. If she wanted to pass through, she was bound to be struck twice by the lightning bolts. For the sake of her life, she didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Mu Rochuan's expression was incomparably dark at this moment. She couldn't figure out why the lightning talisman that Arbor threw out actually had such offensive power. Why didn't it show any signs of stopping after more than 20 bolts of lightning? How many bolts of lightning could there be? This was also the question in Elder Mu, Mu Jingfeng, and the rest's hearts. At this moment, all the Mu family members were looking at the little crown princess on the stage in shock. If it was said that they were just giving it a try in the beginning, leisurely watching the competition between the two juniors, they didn't take it seriously. But now they were practically sizing them up with rapt attention, paying attention to their every move. Especially the little crown princess, who was standing alone on the stage without moving an inch. Everyone's gaze fell on her. It seemed that this was the only way to clearly see what kind of energy this little fellow's body was filled with to actually be able to draw a lightning talisman that defied the laws of heaven. Boom! Mu Rochuan's footsteps slowed by half a beat, and a bolt of lightning immediately struck her back. The defensive barrier on her body instantly broke, and the defensive spiritual weapon in her hand also dimmed and fell to the ground with a clatter. Mu Qingya immediately shouted, "Rochuan, what are you still hesitating for? Hurry and admit defeat." Admitting defeat wasn't shameful. This was originally a family competition, and losing to someone of the same age wasn't a big deal. No one could guarantee that they wouldn't lose in this lifetime. Mu Rochuan also understood this logic, but she just couldn't accept it emotionally. She would lose to Arbor in front of everyone and all her uncles. Therefore, she didn't want to admit defeat. She didn't want to admit defeat at all. What kind of talisman is this? Mu Rochuan spat out a mouthful of blood. She turned her head and glared fiercely at Arbor, as if she wanted to burn a hole in her face. She hated the girl in front of her. Because of her appearance, she broke the legend of her high and mighty young miss, causing her to fall from a genius to the bottom of the valley in an instant, and become an ordinary person. Because of her sharp edge, she, the genius Miss Mu of the Mu family, was overshadowed and completely lost the halo of the past. After this battle, when people mentioned the Mu family's young lady in the future, they would only take delight in talking about how amazing the young crown princess was. Her talisman crafting technique could be said to be the best in the world since ancient times. How hateful! Mu Rochuan felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. If she were to look inwardly, she would definitely realize that the crack in the spiritual mound mirror had widened significantly. There was even a faint black gas floating out of the spiritual mound mirror. It was like a death aura that enveloped her spiritual mound mirror as it slowly rotated. If she could notice it now or ask Grandpa Mu about it, Grandpa Mu would definitely be shocked and ask her to pay more attention to it. However, she did not notice the gloomy black gas. This was the initial phenomenon of mental demons growing crazily after the crack in the spiritual mound mirror. Chapter 3378. At this moment, this dark and demonic aura quietly took root in Mu Rochuan's heart and slowly grew. As it grew, it would slowly corrode her limbs and bones, invading the depths of her meridians. Once this demonic aura corroded her entire body, Mu Rochuan would lose all of her cultivation and explode from the inside out. At this time, as her inner demon slowly grew, Mu Rochuan would only discover that her cultivation was slowly regressing. If she didn't take this seriously, the consequences would be unthinkable. What kind of talisman is this? Another bolt of lightning struck Mu Rochuan's body. She only felt the power of the lightning slipping into her damaged meridians. It was running amok in all the meridians in her body, making her feel very uncomfortable. Arbor coldly glanced at her and said indifferently, "Third-level top-grade lightning talisman." What was a third-level top-grade lightning talisman? None of the Mu family disciples present had heard of it before. However, they weren't all fools. Just by hearing the name and combining it with the current situation on the stage, a portion of them were instantly enlightened. Third level? It can't be that there are 36 bolts of lightning, right? A Mu family disciple cried out in shock. Meanwhile, Mu Yuanyuan was already dumbfounded and subconsciously grabbed Mu Lixiang's hand. "Li Lixiang, did you hear that?" Mu Lixiang nodded heavily, her eyes shining with excitement. As expected, wanting to befriend the crown princess from the start was absolutely correct. If she had the chance, she would definitely ask the little crown princess for guidance. The last 3 bolts of spiritual lightning struck Mu Rochuan's body. Mu Rochuan couldn't withstand it, and was directly smashed to the ground by the lightning bolts. A trace of blood appeared in her mouth, and she coughed several times. She felt her body become very heavy, and she didn't even have the strength to lift a finger. Xiaomu glanced at Mu Rochuan, before turning around to walk down the martial arts stage. She merely threw out the words, "You've lost." It was unknown if this sentence provoked Mu Rochuan, but she suddenly struggled to get up from the ground. She reached out to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth, and suddenly laughed with a hoarse voice. "You think you've won?" Mu Rochuan's voice instantly became extremely cold. Arbor turned to look at her, and saw that her eyes were glowing with a strange light. Her expression was focused and somewhat distorted as she looked at her. "Did you win?" she shouted harshly. Mu Qingya's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to rush up and drag her troublesome daughter off the stage. However, just as her body moved slightly, the old madam reached out and pressed the back of her hand. She shook her head at her. "The competition is still going on. It's futile for you to go up." Based on Mu Rochuan's current situation, even if her father, Mu Jingfeng, went up, with Rochuan's competitive nature, she probably wouldn't listen to her father's words and obediently step down from the stage, much less Wuxia, who was an ordinary person. The old madam sighed, feeling sorry for her granddaughter. She used to be such an obedient and sensible child. How could she have been blinded by jealousy and become so extremely terrifying? The competition isn't over yet. Mu Rochuan's eyes flashed with a strange light. She suddenly flung out several talismans shrouded in black aura from her sleeves and instantly pounced on Arbor's back. Mu Xingqian immediately stood up from his seat. Rochuan, what are you doing? Chapter 3379. Mu Rochuan's mind was already muddled by her desire to win, so how could she still hear Mu Xingqian's reprimand? Moreover, even if she heard Mu Xingqian's reprimand, she probably wouldn't take it to heart. In her heart, this big brother had already switched sides and completely stood on Arbor's side. They were no longer on the same path. Arbor slightly turned his head and frowned as he stared at the several talismans emitting dense black aura that Mu Rochuan threw over. It's a mystic talisman. A Mu family elder couldn't help but jump up and shout with a grave expression. How can eldest young misuse talismans? What was a mystic talisman? Everyone in the Mu family knew about it. It was a talisman filled with evil energy drawn by a talisman master. The mystic talisman was the most basic offensive talisman among the forbidden talisman arts. A powerful talisman master could draw the evil energy between heaven and earth and make it enter the human body, controlling and even wantonly destroying the body. A person who was hit by a mystic talisman usually didn't know that they had been cursed. The power of this talisman could perhaps lie dormant in a person's body for 3 to 5 years. Once it erupted, the person would either be manipulated into a puppet or die without a burial ground. It was no joke that everyone hated talisman masters. At least in the 3 continents, no one welcomed a dark existence like talisman masters. The Mu family's patriarch, Mu Jingfeng, stared at his daughter with an unsightly expression, inwardly cursing Mu Rochuan's brain. You secretly grasped talisman arts. If you only used them in secret, no one would be able to catch you. But now, you used this kind of sinister talisman in front of everyone's eyes. How could it not arouse everyone's disgust? At this time, there were already several Mu family elders sitting in the elders' seats. The originally silent Mu family elders were frowning slightly as they coldly looked at Mu Rochuan. Many Mu family disciples in the crowd also shouted, "Eldest young miss actually knows such a vicious talisman art like the mystic talisman? Heavens, is she still a disciple of our divine province's Mu family? What's her relationship with the talisman master? Eldest young miss, you're actually a talisman master. How disappointing." Everyone couldn't help but stand up and look worriedly in the young crown prince consort's direction. Could the little crown princess deal with the powerful charm master? All of this happened in a matter of minutes. While everyone was cheering, the Xianin talismans that Mu Rochuan threw out had already arrived in front of Arbor. Seeing these mystic talismans split open in front of Qiao Mu's face, and wisps of turbid energy swarmed out from within, everyone couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for the young crown prince consort. Old Master Mu jumped up from his seat and dashed toward the ring. Roxian really had no sense of propriety. With such a dense wave of energy, the little crown princess, huh? Everyone was flabbergasted when they discovered that the seemingly dense mass of energy froze in place when it was 3 inches away from the little crown princess. It wasn't willing to take even half a step forward. That mass of energy seemed to be extremely afraid of the little crown princess's body. After hesitating for a few seconds, it turned around with a whoosh and rushed directly in Mu Rochuan's direction. Everyone stared blankly at the scene before them, unable to understand what was going on. What was with this energy? Chapter 3380. Baleful energy also had things that were afraid of it. Everyone simultaneously glanced at the young crown prince consort. There was nothing unusual, but Mo Lian felt that his little wifey was like a ball of light. These evil and filthy things naturally had to stay away from the source of light, and didn't dare to approach. Just like those ghosts that the little fellow encountered in the underground palace. Didn't these sinister and ghostly things also not dare to approach his wifey? Emolien secretly muttered in his heart. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his conjecture was very reasonable. His wifey was definitely a ball of light. Arbor expressionlessly looked at the baleful energy that had retreated back and was rushing towards Mu Rochuan. Blinking her eyes, she looked down at her little hand in confusion. Just now, she was already prepared to throw out an Earth-grade defensive talisman to break these baleful energy. But they were actually very perceptive and didn't come over. Since that was the case, she also didn't have the leisure to chase after these sinister and ghostly things. And at this very moment, Mu Rochuan was in big trouble. The baleful energy that she had released had actually turned around and wrapped around her. At this moment, Mu Rochuan's face was shrouded in a black fog. Her entire body was immersed in the black fog as she crazily swung her hands and kicked around while shouting, "Scram! All of you scram! Scram!" No one knew what she saw. People who were trapped by the baleful energy would naturally see all kinds of strange illusions. At this moment, an elderly elder of the Mu family's elder council stood up and said with a frosty expression, "Mu Rochuan lost." Before using the profound talisman, she had already used her own cultivation and spiritual power, as well as borrowed external force to activate her spirit artifact to create a defensive barrier. Even so, she still lost, that elder said with a straight face. She even used the profound talisman, this kind of sinister and ghostly thing. This old man feels that Mu Rochuan must be severely punished. She should be locked up in the dungeon for the time being, and wait for the elder council to discuss with the family head and old family head, before deciding on how to deal with her. The moment he said those words, the surroundings instantly became silent. This Mu family elder's surname was Dao, and he was famous for being straightforward. After he emphasized this matter, Mu Rochuan felt even more embarrassed. Mu Qingya hurriedly stood up. Just as she opened her mouth to defend her daughter, she heard Mu Jingfeng's stiff voice. Elder Dao's words are very reasonable. Guards, Mu Rochuan has violated the family's rules and practiced the forbidden talisman technique without permission. Lock her up in the dungeon first and deal with her later. The guests couldn't help but look at each other. Today's events really came one after another. At this moment, the Mu family actually locked up their family's genius eldest miss in jail. However, when they thought about how this young miss actually practiced the forbidden talisman technique, everyone looked at her with hostility. Curse masters were known throughout the entire continent. They were a notorious race. These people often liked to hide in dark corners and secretly plot against others. Perhaps a charm master hiding in the crowd would secretly make a move against you and use charm techniques, causing you to never have a day of peace in the next few years, or even die suddenly. No one liked this kind of race. The people of the Divine Mainland would also have a change in expression at the mention of charm masters. Eldest Miss Mu was truly courting death. Chapter 3381. Before Mu Jingfeng could personally make a move, Elder Dao had already thrown out a wisp of divine power and tightly bound Mu Rochuan's hands. Mu Rochuan's body was instantly bound. She wanted to struggle free, but was helpless. She could only scream, "Let go, let go! You guys, what do you want to do? Let go! Take her away!" Mu Jingfeng glared angrily, appearing very agitated and abnormally angry. This Mu Rochuan was really getting more and more outrageous. It was fine if she couldn't help him, but now she was causing trouble for him everywhere, not letting him off. She was simply about to become a useless piece. Let go of me, you guys. Let go of me. Mu Rochuan screamed. Her hands were firmly bound by divine power, which made her feel a little at a loss. She had never been treated like this since she was young. She was flustered and appeared very angry as she kept yelling. However, at this moment, no one cared about her mood. Immediately, two Mu family members jumped onto the stage and took down the struggling and roaring Mu Rochuan. Mu Qingya clenched her fists tightly. After a while, she slumped down on the stool. The crown princess wins this round. Xiao Mu expressionlessly leaped down from the martial arts stage and walked towards her seat. Go find Madame Mu and settle the accounts of Miss Mu's several properties in Dragon Flame City. Arbor indifferently turned his head and instructed Kaixio. Kaixio nodded in understanding and pursed her lips in response. She quickly walked to Mu Qingya's side and whispered a few words to her. Although Arbor didn't show it on his face, he was secretly carefully observing Mu Qingya's expression. He saw her nodding at Kaixio with a gentle and indifferent expression and whispering a few words to Kaixio. Her behavior was very appropriate and magnanimous, without the slightest trace of anger. Arbor couldn't help but frown. He immediately retracted his gaze and reached out to pick up the spoon with an indifferent expression. Was Madame Mu really able to keep her composure, or was she really friendly to her? Was he being too paranoid? Arbor thought. He put down the spoon and looked at Mu Qingya again. However, she saw that First Madam had turned her head and met her gaze. First Madam smiled faintly and nodded. There was not a trace of dissatisfaction in her expression. Kaixio walked to her side and whispered. First Madam said that after the banquet, she will send someone to deliver the land deeds that eldest Miss owes the Crown Princess. Oh. The young Crown Prince Consort nodded indifferently as she turned her gaze to the tournament stage. At this time, the second round of the Mu clan's disciple competition had already begun. Both sides' talisman techniques were a bit on par. However, after witnessing the wonderful talisman technique battle between the eldest Miss and the Crown Princess, everyone felt as if they were chewing wax and didn't know what to eat. Even eldest Miss Mu couldn't compare to the talisman skills of these two, let alone the Crown Princess. Everyone drank while enjoying the Mu family competition. For a moment, the atmosphere was harmonious. Mu Tsang raised his cup and smiled at family head Qin, who came to propose a toast. The two whispered a few words. Suddenly, a hearty laugh sounded in the air. Ha ha ha, I'm not late, am I? Today, I heard that the talisman patrician families of the Divine Prefecture are holding a grand family competition. Disciple Qi Fong is passing by and would like to ask the brothers of the Mu clan for advice on talisman techniques. Chapter 3382. Song Prefecture's Phoenix Arch City. Qi Fong, disciple of a talisman patrician family, is here to pay a visit to old Master Mu. I wonder which brother from the Mu clan is interested and dares to compete with me. As his voice fell, everyone saw several figures sitting on the back of a large flying spirit beast, flying kite, swiftly arriving at the venue. Several people descended from the sky, beaming from ear to ear. The young man called Qi Fong leaped up with a vigorous posture and landed on the battle stage with a so sound. At this moment, there were two Mu clan disciples competing on the stage. After Qi Fong intervened, a burning fire talisman appeared in each of his hands, and he instantly threw them at the two Mu clan disciples. Those two were caught off guard and happened to be caught off guard. The two burning fire talismans sprang up with a rub on their bodies, and the intensity of the fire instantly soared high into the sky. Mu Jingrui's expression darkened. His hand moved, and he rapidly shot out two water spirit talismans, instantly extinguishing the flames on those two people. Everyone focused their eyes and saw that those two brats' faces were blackened by the fire spirit talismans, and there were already many burn wounds on their bodies. The men who came with Qi Fong all turned to look at Mu Jingrui. One of them said with a smile, "Black-grade water spirit talismans? I believe this must be 7th Master Mu." Mu Jingrui coldly swept a glance at that person. "Who are you people? Are you here to cause trouble?" That young man named Qi Fong just now didn't control his strength and threw out two black-grade fire spirit talismans at once. Currently, there were two advanced stage talisman masters competing on the stage. How could they possibly withstand something like a black-grade fire spirit talisman? It was inevitable that they would be burned, but this young man's actions made people very unhappy. He suddenly appeared and interfered in the competition of other clans' disciples. If it was someone with a bit of common sense, they naturally wouldn't do such a disrespectful thing. "Sai, 7th Master Mu is too serious." The middle-aged man who spoke smiled and pointed at the young man on the stage. "This is our Qi clan's young Master Fong. I am Old Zhong, a servant of the Qi clan. We are from the talisman patrician family of Song Prefecture's Phoenix Arch City." The Mu family's disciples all looked at the Qi family's people who suddenly appeared with unkind eyes. Needless to say, These people from the Qi family were definitely here to mess things up. Otherwise, why would she show up at Grandpa Mu's birthday party? Why would she come to the stage uninvited and throw out 2 dark-level fire talismans at the 2 disciples who were in the middle of the competition? Young Master Fong is the 33rd talisman master in our Qi family's younger generation. I'm 28 years old this year. Old Zhong chuckled as he explained. It would have been fine if he hadn't said anything. But once he did, everyone's expressions became a little strange. Especially the guests. They looked at the 2 Mu clan disciples on the battle stage, their faces blackened from the burns, and then looked at young Master Fong who won, and who lost was immediately revealed. This young Master Fong was only 28 years old, yet he was able to subdue 2 talisman masters of the Mu family in one move. As for the 2 Mu clan disciples on the martial arts stage, it was obvious that they were much older than young Master Fong. Although the faces of the 2 Mu family disciples were burnt black, it could be seen from the expression on their faces that other than embarrassment, there was also a trace of shame. They had disgraced the Mu family. This young Master Fong had subdued them in one move, and they didn't even have the slightest ability to fight back. Chapter 3383. The Qi family's young master was only 28 years old, and he was only ranked 33rd among the Qi family's younger generation. With this ranking, he was able to suppress 2 Mu family disciples with one move. The 2 of them were so embarrassed that they could not lift their heads. This was truly shameful. If not for 7th Master's help just now, they might have been seriously injured by the other party's fire spirit talisman. The 2 of them drooped their heads and lowered them. Moving their feet, they ran down the stage dejectedly. And at this moment, only Qi Fong alone was standing on the enormous battling platform. This youth stood with his hands behind his back, looking like a talisman grandmaster, and rather arrogant. This little brother has specially come to seek guidance from the Mu family disciples. I wonder which brother Mu is willing to come on stage and compete with this little brother? When Qi Fong's words fell, the entire venue was silent. The group of Mu clan disciples looked at each other, and all of them were at a loss of what to do. They were not fools. Anyone could see that this Qi Fong dared to challenge the Mu family alone. So he must have something extraordinary about him. The competition venue was in the Mu family. If the Mu family's eldest young master directly went up, he would definitely be able to suppress and defeat Qi Fong. However, Qi Fong had already said that he was ranked 33rd among the Qi family's younger generation. If the Mu family sent Mu Xingqian, who was ranked first, to deal with this fellow, wouldn't it be lowering Mu Xingqian's status too much? However, if they sent someone else, they might not necessarily win. Just as the elders were muttering to themselves, Mu Wuxi jumped up from his seat. I'll compete with you. His father, Mu Jingyang, subconsciously turned around and glared fiercely at his son. This impulsive fellow jumped out without seeing the situation clearly. As a father, how could he not know how good his son's talisman skills were? This Qi family disciple was a black-ranked talisman grandmaster, so his son was definitely not his match. However, Mu Wuxi had already stepped up, so as a father, he had no reason to crush his son's confidence. Thus, he could only glare fiercely at Mu Wuxi and say, "Don't show off." Mu Wuxi glanced at his father, and hurriedly ran up the stage. He tilted his head and glared at Qi Fong. "Surname Qi, this young master will fight you." Qi Fong didn't get angry. He just calmly cupped his hands at Mu Wuxi. "Nice to meet you. Little brother, please go ahead." Mu Wuxi did not hold back. Since the other party asked him to go first, there was no reason for him not to make the first move. In fact, for Mu Wuxi to be able to reach the high level of talisman master at the age of 13, he could already be considered a genius. However, he had taken after his father's temper since he was young. He was impulsive and easily angered. Now that he was on the stage, he threw 2 attack talismans at Qi Fong without hesitation. Qi Fong chuckled and threw out a defensive talisman to block the attack. Then, with a flick of his left hand, a fire talisman flew towards Mu Wuxi at lightning speed. Mu Jingrui's eyes darkened slightly as he exchanged glances with the Mu family's third uncle, Mu Jingyuan, who was sitting beside him. The other party really didn't come with good intentions. He had prepared quite a few fire talismans on him. It looked like he was determined to make their Mu family look bad this time. Mu Xingqian frowned. I'll go chase him away. Mu Jingrui shook his head. Xingqian, you can't go up. And Xingqian, you stay here. Mu Jingyuan nodded in agreement. Chapter 3384. Yet, the other party sent a small fry ranked 33rd to provoke them. If Xingqian had to go up and deal with this, then it meant that their Mu family had no one else. Aside from Xingqian, they did not have any other capable disciples. Mu Xingqian also understood this logic, but how could he watch someone come to his grandfather's birthday banquet to provoke them, and not say anything? Let's wait and see, Mu Jingrui said in a low voice, but his expression was frighteningly dark. This Qifeng was a clown. If they did not take him down, then he would continue to disgust them. However, the most difficult thing to do now was that there were so many guests present in front of everyone. If the Mu family did not take out some real skills and take down this Qi family member, then everyone would definitely suspect that their Mu family was an unwarranted family. More seriously, they might even think that the Mu family of the Divine Prefecture's Talisman Patrician family was inferior to the Qi family of Zhangzhou's Phoenix Emperor City. In just a few moments, the match between Qifeng and Mu Wuxi had reached a point where the victor was already decided. Although Mu Wuxi was still young and had outstanding talisman techniques, he would lose without any suspense in front of a black-ranked talisman master. The other party threw out an explosion talisman. As the stage shook, Mu Wuxi's figure quickly retreated. He somersaulted several times in the air, but he was still unable to avoid the flames from the explosion talisman. Once the flames touched his body, the layer of defense on his skin quickly withered away. Seeing that his son was about to be enveloped by the flames from the explosion talisman, after the layer of defense burned away, Mu Jingyang could no longer bear it and jumped up. Fifth brother. Mu Jingrui called out, and hurriedly reached out to stop him. If he rushed up the stage, others would definitely mock him in their hearts, even if they did not say anything. The son could not beat the other party, so the father rushed up. If word got out, it would not be good for the Mu family's reputation. Mu Jingyang was impulsive by nature. Being stopped by Mu Jingrui, his temper rushed up, and he was about to explode. Mu Jingfeng said coldly, "Sit down. Go find Yuan Yuan. Let her go up and replace Mu Wuxi." Mu Jingfeng said indifferently. Mu He, who was standing behind him, nodded. He immediately accepted the order and walked behind the screen, towards the table where the girls from the cadet branch were seated. Mu Yuanyuan immediately nodded in agreement after she conveyed the patriarch's intentions to Mu Yuanyuan. Mu Lixiang, on the other hand, was not convinced. She pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "They never look for us when there's good stuff." Whenever she encountered such a difficult situation, she would always think of the disciples of the side branches. Replacing Mu Wuxi meant that Yuanyuan would have to face the young master of the Qi family. It would be fine if she could beat him, but if Yuanyuan couldn't beat the Qi clan's disciple, she might even be blamed by the Mu clan. Mu Yuanyuan accepted the order and stood up. She just so happened to see the little crown princess looking over. She nodded at her with a smile and walked towards the battle arena. The disciples of the Mu family all around were whispering to each other in low voices. Now that Mu Yuanyuan was on the stage, everyone's eyes were focused on her. Mu family, Mu Yuanyuan. Please give me some pointers, young Master Qi. Mu Yuanyuan leaped onto the battle arena and reached out to support Mu Wuxi, who had retreated several steps. She raised a water spirit talisman and slapped it on Mu Wuxi's body. The flames that had been rising on Mu Wuxi's body instantly disappeared. Chapter 3385. Qi Feng's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the girl in front of him with a slight smile. Mu Yuanyuan was not very good-looking. At best, she could only be considered a delicate beauty. However, she was standing calmly in front of everyone, giving off a sense of security. Qi Feng glanced at the extinguished flames on Mu Wuxi's body. His eyes flashed as he smiled. The women of the Mu family are not inferior to any men. Mu Yuanyuan's water spirit talisman must be a black-grade talisman. Otherwise, it would not be able to extinguish the flames on Mu Wuxi's body. Sister Yuan Yuan. Mu Wuxi naturally knew Mu Yuan Yuan. Moreover, he had a good relationship with her. This little brat usually submitted to the strong. Mu Yuan Yuan was a girl from the side family, but she was stronger than him. Mu Wuxi was very convinced of Mu Yuan Yuan's strength. Alright, you can go down first and treat your wounds. Leave this to Sister Yuan Yuan. Mu Yuan Yuan smiled at him and chased him away. There were many small wounds on Mu Wuxi's body, all of which were formed during the battle. Qi Fang looked gentle and refined, but in reality, he was very heavy-handed. If Mu Wuxi had not been quick-witted, he would have been carried off the stage. Qi Fang smiled at Mu Yuan Yuan. Miss Mu, please. Mu Yuan Yuan did not waste time talking nonsense with him. She cupped her fists and bowed. The moment she looked up, her eyes were already sharp as she attacked Qi Fang. Mu Yuan Yuan's hand gestures were very fast. With a flick of her hand, 3 talismans appeared. After the defensive talisman strengthened herself, the offensive talisman was already in front of Qi Fang. Qi Fang smiled coldly without panicking. He reached out and flicked away one of the offensive talismans. The talisman power contained in the other 2 offensive talismans was blocked in mid-air by the offensive talisman he threw out. The 2 offensive talismans collided and produced an earth-shattering sound. A vortex of power appeared in the air and spread out with a loud bang. Fortunately, the defensive talisman array around the martial arts stage had been reinforced. This wave of attack naturally did not affect the spectators sitting in the front row. The guest spirits were lifted, and the way they looked at Mu Yuan Yuan also changed a little. Looking at the position the woman was sitting in, it was clear that she was not a direct descendant of the Mu family. It seemed that they had underestimated the Mu family. It was not that the Mu family did not have any talents. The powerful talisman technique displayed by a branch family disciple was already amazing. At this moment, Mu Yuan Yuan was completely focused on Qi Fang. When she saw him move his finger, an immobilization talisman floated over. She hurriedly turned around to dodge, but the body-securing talisman seemed to have a tracking function as it chased after her slender figure. No matter how many times Mu Yuan Yuan tried to dodge, she couldn't avoid it. Mu Yuan Yuan frowned. She took out 2 defensive talismans from her inner world and quickly opened them, erecting 2 defensive walls around her. The body-securing talisman suddenly pounced over and exploded in front of her eyes. Mu Yuan Yuan felt a strong binding of talisman power. She was actually frozen in place. Of course, being immobilized only lasted for an instant. Mu Yuan Yuan immediately used the adversity-dispelling talisman to break free from the immobilization talisman. In the eyes of an outsider, this was only a matter of 1 or 2 seconds. Of course, some juniors with poor eyesight didn't even notice that Mu Yuan Yuan had been immobilized for 1 or 2 seconds. But it was precisely this 1 or 2 seconds of immobilization. Qi Fang took the opportunity to throw out an explosion talisman, which exploded on Mu Yuan Yuan's body. Chapter 3386. Following a loud bang, the ground shook violently. Mu Yuan Yuan's body was sent flying backwards by the explosion talisman. She landed on the edge of the stage with a thud, half of her body hanging upside down. She spat out a large amount of blood, evidently severely injured. Good. At this very moment, someone suddenly cheered and clapped his hands together, producing a resounding slap. All the guests looked at each other in dismay, before turning their gazes to that Qi family's old servant. This guy actually slapped them in the face, and even shouted the word good so loudly. Sure enough, when the word good fell, the faces of all the Mu family disciples, including old Master Mu, changed at the same time. All the Mu family disciples glared at that old fellow. There were even hot-blooded youths who jumped up from their seats and cursed. What's so good about you, old fellow? Old servant didn't get angry. He squinted his eyes and said with a chuckle, Ah, it was a slip of the tongue. I only praised my family's young master, because his explosion talismans were thrown with great skill. I didn't expect to empathize with everyone's feelings. Ha 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 ha. Old servant laughed as he spoke. His sarcastic remarks angered everyone in the Mu family so much that their chests hurt. Qi Feng confidently stood on the stage with his hands behind his back, assuming the demeanor of a talisman grandmaster. Everyone, I hope everyone won't patronize me. Sending a woman up to compete with me. Isn't this a bit of an insult to my Qi Feng? At this moment, Mu Lixiang had already led people to the side of the stage and reached out to help Mu Yuanyuan, who was half hanging on the stage down. A hint of bitterness appeared on Mu Yuanyuan's lips as she smiled at her. She only managed to say, "I'm fine," before she spat out another mouthful of blood. It was obvious that the explosion talisman that had exploded on her body had injured her internal organs. Yuanyuan. Mu Lixiang almost cried out. Yuanyuan's current appearance was too frightening. Her small face was deathly pale, as if she would stop breathing in the next moment. The blood from her mouth and nose couldn't be stopped. Mu Jingrui also hurried over at this moment and took out a healing pill for Mu Yuanyuan to consume. He turned to glare at Qi Feng with fury and said, "You were too heavy-handed. How can you beat someone up like this in a sparring session?" Sorry. Qi Feng hurriedly explained with a smile. "I was the one who acted inappropriately. I have a healing pill here. I hope that after Miss takes it, your body will feel slightly better." When Mu Lixiang saw this lowly man's chuckle as he handed over a black pill, she was immediately enraged. She reached out and slapped Qi Feng's hand. "Who wants your medicinal pills?" Scram. Old Zheng's face darkened as he mocked. "What's wrong? Is the Mu family a sore loser? After losing, you flew into a rage out of humiliation and threw a tantrum at our young master. Didn't you?" Without waiting for Mu Lixiang to shout, Old Zheng interrupted her and continued. "In a martial arts competition, there is always a question of how much strength to use. Our young master didn't know that your family's young miss's body was so weak. How could he have expected that a mere explosion talisman would be able to beat her to such a state? If you guys had said earlier that this young miss's body was delicate and weak, we wouldn't have fought with her." The reprimand caused the Mu family disciples' faces to turn green, white and red. Mu Jingrui also felt a lump of resentment in his chest that couldn't go up or down. It was extremely uncomfortable to hold it in. Chapter 3387. Mu Xingqian stood up and coldly said, "Since young Master Qi is so formidable, I, Mu Xingqian, am willing to experience young Master Qi's brilliant moves." Qi Feng's eyes flickered. Who in the 3 provinces didn't know of Mu Xingqian's great name? He was the Mu family's most outstanding genius eldest young master. Compared to Mu Rochuan, he was in no way inferior. Rumor had it that this eldest young master Mu was already a black stage talisman master. Moreover, his cultivation had already broken through to the divine realm, so he was also a very formidable cultivator. Qi Feng naturally had no confidence in defeating such a person. Old Zheng chuckled. You flatter me. Our young Master Qi is only ranked 33rd in the Qi family. Since young Master Mu wants to give him pointers, then we can only accept. Mu Jingfeng and the rest's expressions turned very ugly when they heard this. This fellow had repeatedly emphasized that Qi Feng was only ranked 33rd. Even if Mu Xingqian wanted to make a move on him, with eldest young Master Mu's status, even if he won, it would be considered an unfair victory. If eldest young Master Mu lost, then that would be called losing face all the way to the sea of forgetfulness. Put her down. A cold voice came from behind Mu Lixiang. Mu Lixiang turned to see the young crown princess, standing expressionlessly behind them. She didn't know when she had walked over. She was currently frowning as she looked at Mu Yuanyuan, whose nose and mouth were still bleeding, and pointed at the empty space at the side. Mu Lixiang didn't understand, but when she saw Mu Jingrui quickly nod at her, she obeyed and helped Mu Yuanyuan to the side. Arbor stepped forward and squatted down. She took out her needle bag and inserted 2 needles into Mu Yuanyuan's body. Then, she took out a bottle of medicinal liquid and fed her a mouthful. She placed the medicinal liquid in Mu Lixiang's hand. Feed her another mouthful tonight, tomorrow and the day after, once in the morning and once in the evening. 3 days later, her internal injuries will be healed. Mu Lixiang looked at her in shock. She lowered her head to glance at Mu Yuanyuan, and saw that her complexion had indeed become much rosier. She was immediately overjoyed and repeatedly thanked her. "Thank you, Crown Princess, for your treatment." The little Crown Princess was indeed skilled in medicine. Yuan Yuan's complexion was much better after 2 simple injections and a sip of the medicine. Old Zhong looked at the medicine bottle in Mu Lixiang's hand. His eyes flashed and he suddenly said, "Miss, can the medicine bottle in your hand?" Mu Lixiang looked at him warily, then put the bottle into her inner world. Then, he ignored Old Zhong and directly called for someone to lift Mu Yuan up. The group of people then carried Mu Yuan out of the banquet. Old Zhong's expression darkened. His hawk-like eyes stared coldly in the direction Mu Lixiang and the others had left, and he let out a cold snort. Following which, his gaze landed on the young Crown Prince Consort in a good mood. "This is..." Arbor was too lazy to bother with him. His body flashed, and he was already standing on the contest ring. His eyes flashed like cold lightning. "I will compete with you on behalf of my big brother." Qi Fong looked at the little girl in front of him, who was like a jade sculpture, and sparks flashed through his eyes. "Little girl, your body is delicate and weak. Don't cry when you lose." Qi Fong had just finished his teasing when a jade talisman leaped out with a whoosh and flew straight toward him. The powerful binding talisman power seemed to form a spiderweb that suddenly enveloped his entire body, causing Qi Fong's expression to instantly change. Chapter 3388. What? Qi Fong reacted abruptly and wanted to retreat. However, the 8 trigrams binding talisman that Arbor tossed out had already taken effect. Wherever the crowd looked, circles of 8 trigrams appeared in front of Qi Fong. Like rolling waves, one after another, they ruthlessly smashed onto the unlucky young master of the Qi family. Qi Fong roared angrily, and a strong defensive light burst out from his body. 4 defensive talismans cracked simultaneously, forming 4 defensive walls around him. However, it was of no use. The 8 trigrams binding talisman that was tossed out was still like waves, constantly smashing onto Qi Fong's body. At first, Qi Fong could still barely use his cultivation to resist the first few waves. After being smashed by the 8 trigrams binding talisman a dozen times, he suddenly felt that his limbs and bones, from his hands to his feet, were all bound. He was actually bound on the spot by the 8 trigrams binding talisman. Although everyone's eyes could not see it, he felt as if he was trapped in a huge spider web, unable to move an inch. At this moment, Qi Fong stood dumbfounded on the battle stage, unable to move even half a step. Although the others also saw the 8 trigrams binding talisman landing on Qi Fong's body like waves, the 8 trigrams binding talisman only appeared for a moment before disappearing. When they looked at Qi Fong now, they only saw that he was left on the battle stage like a block of wood. Clearly, his sorry state was somewhat laughable. Arbor's gaze landed coldly on this person. He raised his hand, and a jade talisman jumped in front of him and slowly flew up, hanging high above Qi Fong's head. "So what if she's a woman? Are women inferior to you?" Arbor swept a cold glance at Qi Fong. Qi Fong was completely bound by the 8 trigrams binding talisman at this moment. Other than his eyeballs that could move slightly, he could not move at all. He was also very anxious at this moment, thinking of every possible way to break free from the bindings. However, after a few seconds, he still could not move an inch. Even his fingers could not move half an inch. "Explode!" Arbor glanced at him indifferently and said coldly. With a loud boom, everyone at the meeting felt the chairs under them shake a few times, and their faces couldn't help but change. The might of this explosion talisman was clearly much more powerful than the one Qi Fong had used on Mu Yuan. This was a jade talisman, and it was glowing with a purple light. It was obviously a purple talisman. Everyone saw that the talisman that Qi Fong had used to hit Mu Yuan was a blue talisman drawn on talisman paper. It was very different from the jade talisman used by the little crown princess in front of him. The talisman power contained in it was naturally on a different level. At this moment, the people in the banquet hall were all craning their necks to look at Qi Fong, who was on the stage. Qi Fong was originally bound by the 8 trigrams body binding talisman and was unable to move at all. At this moment, after being blasted by the explosion talisman, his entire body was like a kite with a broken string, rolling towards the back of the stage. Everyone couldn't help but cover their eyes. Then they heard a loud tremor. Young Master Fong. Old Zhong's face instantly turned extremely ugly, and he quickly rushed towards the battle stage. Young Master Fong. Young Master Fong. Several members of the Qi family also rushed over with old Zhong, and hurriedly helped Qi Fong, who was lying on the ground and foaming at the mouth up. Wah! Qi Fong bent his body and curled up into a prawn. Chapter 3389. Before he could say anything, he spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground. Following that, he coughed out blood, and leaned on old Zhong's body in a dispirited manner. He gasped for breath and made a noise in his throat, but he couldn't say anything. Qi Fong's eyes were currently glaring at the young crown princess in front of him with resentment and fear. His eyes couldn't conceal his fury. However, old Zhong couldn't bear it anymore and roared. What is your Mu clan doing? We agreed to compare notes, so how can you injure our young Master Fong to this extent? The young crown princess looked at them expressionlessly and frowned at the questioning old Zhong. After a long pause, she said, You didn't use immobilization talismans and explosion talismans earlier? You can use them. I can't use them. Only you can win, but I can't win. She threw 3 consecutive questions at old Zhong, which put him in an awkward position. He stood dumbstruck on the stage, supporting Qi Fong without replying for a long time. Arbor glared at old Zhong in displeasure. Do you still want to continue the competition? She discovered that these people's talisman skills were truly a bit weak. In Arbor's eyes, this talisman practitioner, who was said to be ranked 33rd in the Qi family, couldn't even compare to her talisman skills when she was 10 years old. What talisman master? This was simply a joke. The little lady's tone is quite big. A bald, middle-aged man with an oval face walked out from the Qi family's team. His eyes were mocking as they landed on Arbor. This one is Qi Lu. I'm willing to learn. Before this bald man called Qi Lu could finish speaking, he saw the little stoic dashing forward at lightning speed. Her speed was so fast that it was almost impossible for people to catch her movement trajectory for a moment. Teleportation talisman. Mu Jingfeng and the others' eyes couldn't help but light up when they saw the little lady teleport behind Qi Lu in an instant. So this was a teleportation talisman? Everyone was filled with awe. It was an eye-opener. This was the first time the Mu clan had seen a teleportation talisman. They had only seen this type of talisman in books before, and it was a lost talisman technique to the Mu clan. But now, while everyone was still in shock, Arbor had already arrived in front of Qi Lu. His 5 fingers spread open and tightly clasped his neck. Qi Lu was stunned for a moment before he coughed. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Arbor in disbelief. You. Arbor tightened his grip, and Qi Lu felt a cracking sound coming from his throat, as if his throat was about to be crushed. His eyes were filled with fear. Swoosh. All of a sudden, a sound pierced through the air. An arrowhead forged from fine iron tore through the air like a bolt of lightning, flying over everyone's heads and heading straight for Qiao Mu. In the blink of an eye, Emolian flashed in front of Qiao Mu to shield her. A fire spiritual energy circled around his palm, firmly stabilizing the arrowhead that was shooting toward them in midair, as it let out a clanging hum. Everyone didn't know how Prince Emo flew to the little crown princess side so quickly. Everyone only felt their eyes blur for a moment, and His Highness the Crown Prince, who was originally sitting in the banquet area, had already appeared beside the crown princess and blocked the male arrow with an iron head. Arbor frowned as he looked at the arrow that suddenly appeared. He tugged at Emolien's sleeve and pointed at the arrow. There seems to be a letter left behind. Emolien narrowed her eyes. She broke the arrow and picked up the letter that fluttered down. Chapter 3390. When the letter was unfolded, a small bead hair clip fell out. Qiao Mu's expression changed in the blink of an eye. After skimming through the contents of the letter, the pressure on her entire person dropped by quite a bit. Layers of frost emerged from the depths of her cold and severe eyes, and it seemed like there were shards of ice continuously emerging from her entire body. For a moment, everyone on the scene felt as if winter had arrived. The surrounding atmosphere abruptly chilled, and a terrifying aura of death seemed to be closing in. Huifeng. Assemble the purple forest guards. Prince Emo left with the little crown princess in large strides, leaving only this one sentence. Although the two of them didn't say anything, everyone knew that something big must have happened just by looking at their expressions. The old man was a bit stifled. He exchanged glances with his eldest son, then stood up with an exhausted expression. Many things happened today, and I've tired everyone out. Now that something has happened to the crown princess, this old man's birthday banquet will end here. Long Shoshin smiled eccentrically. Since old man Mu has matters to attend to, it won't be convenient for us to stay any longer. Farewell. Farewell. The other patrician family's heads were not as sarcastic as Long Shoshin. So when they heard the old man's words, they cupped their fists in salute and left one by one. Mu Jingfeng's expression darkened as he instructed Mu Liang, who was beside him, go investigate and see what happened to the crown princess. After Arbor and Emo Lien left the venue hand in hand, her almond-shaped eyes instantly turned several degrees colder. She reached out and swiped at the air, and countless black butterflies flew out from between her fingers, densely staying on the thin letter. Arbor's entire body emitted layers of cold and sharp aura. Go, find out where this person is for me. A sharp, cold glint flashed through the little crown princess's eyes. I want him to be exterminated. Don't worry, Jojo. Nothing will happen. Emolian reached out and grasped Jojo's small hand, a cold glint flashing through her eyes. Pass down the order to seal off all the entrances and exits. No one is allowed to leave the city for the time being. If anyone tries to use flying spirit beasts to break through the city gates, kill them without mercy. At the North City Gate of Dragon Flame City, as usual, this was the peak period for the flow of people in and out of the city. Everyone was lining up to leave the city in an orderly manner. A simple and honest man carrying a carrying pole was in the middle of the line. From time to time, he would use his sleeve to wipe the sweat on his forehead, looking like he was in a hurry to leave the city. Young man, don't worry. There are a lot of people leaving the city at this time. They have to line up. An old woman behind him, supported by her granddaughter, smiled at him in a friendly manner. The simple and honest man grinned, revealing a very silly smile. Right at this moment, the cry of an eagle came from the sky. The commoners looked up and saw a goshawk flying high in the sky. It flapped its wings and swooped down. Everyone let out a small cry in unison, subconsciously shrinking their heads and retreating a few steps. The goshawk landed accurately on the ground and did not hurt anyone. A young man in black jumped down from the goshawk's back. With a cold expression, he reached into his pocket and took out a token, saying loudly, "Pass down the crown prince's verbal order. Temporarily seal the city gates. No one is allowed to enter or leave the city gates. Pass down the crown prince's verbal order." The soldier guarding the city gate was shocked. He hurriedly shouted and ran up the city gate tower, waving his arms. Chapter 3391. What? A small commotion immediately broke out among the queuing commoners. That simple and honest man shouted with a face full of annoyance. How? How can you close the city gates? We are in a hurry to leave the city and go home. That's right, that's right. Hearing his shout, everyone followed suit and shouted one after another. I'm in a hurry to leave the city to exchange things with people. How can you close the city gates? What's the matter? Everyone whispered to each other and shouted with dissatisfaction. The black-clothed youth coldly swept a glance over them. It won't take long, at most an hour. Even if you can't wait, you still have to wait. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. You look at me, I look at you. Their mouths muttered a few words. But in the end, they still didn't dare to confront His Highness the Crown Prince. The simple and honest man seemed to be in a hurry to leave the city, carrying his shoulder pole and squeezing his way to the front of the crowd. His shoulder pole swayed back and forth, bumping into many people. The crowd started to become a little chaotic. Many people cursed and shouted, and there were even some who couldn't help but start fighting because of some small friction. That simple and honest man squeezed his way to the front of the crowd, shouting loudly at the people around him. How can you not let people leave the city? We are all in a hurry. Everyone, let's charge out together. We'll talk after we rush out. Several hot-blooded youths were spurred on by his words, and immediately rushed towards the city gates. With this surge, even those who originally didn't want to cause trouble in the crowd were all pushed towards the gates. The black-clothed youth frowned, and with a raise of his hand, 17 to 18 nimble youths came from all directions, and very accurately picked up the few troublemakers in the crowd, and directly threw them to the ground. Several hot-blooded youths instantly wailed and fell to the ground, only to feel a chill on the top of their heads. When they looked up again, the blade was already pressed against their necks. This movement was really fast. Several people trembled one after another. Who dares to cause trouble at the northern city gates? At this time, several hundred city guards rushed down from the city gate tower. The city guard's small general led a group of people over, and the sharp spears formed a circle around the crowd. Suddenly, all the noises disappeared. Those hot-blooded youths who were still causing a ruckus shrunk their necks one by one, not daring to make a sound. The guard quickly ran to the side of the black-clothed youth, cupped his hands and said, "Sir, the city gate has been closed." The black-clothed youth nodded. His cold eyes turned around and he said indifferently, "Don't make things difficult for them. However, if there are any troublemakers, isolate them first. It won't take long." "Yes." The young guard nodded in agreement. At this moment, the simple and honest man carrying the carrying pole had already shrunk into the crowd. His appearance was simple and honest, and his appearance was ordinary. If he hid in the crowd, he would not attract anyone's attention at all. At this moment, his head was lowered, and one of his hands was pressed against the corner of his green cloth jacket, caressing it from time to time. Everyone was driven to the sides of the road, and looked at each other in dismay. It didn't even take an hour, and only about a quarter of an hour had passed. Everyone first heard the cry of a phoenix. When they looked up, they saw a fiery phoenix that seemed to be burning with blood in the depths of their eyes. The clouds on the horizon were all dyed in the crimson color of bloody flames. Chapter 3392. Everyone's line of sight seemed to be dyed red in an instant. They only felt a magnificent sight meandering over from the horizon, accompanied by a cool, fragrant breeze. It was so beautiful that it made one's heart tremble with fear. When they arrived above the northern city gate, Emolien reached out to grab Arbor's body. The two of them didn't wait for the fire phoenix to descend and jumped down first. They landed lightly on the ground and swept their chilly gazes over everyone in front of them. At this moment, there were thousands of people gathered at the northern city gate. However, at this moment, regardless of whether they were commoners or guards, everyone kept their mouths shut and didn't dare to make a sound. The city gate sunk into a deathly stillness. Emolien loosened her fingers slightly and whispered, "Here?" Arbor nodded. With a flick of his finger, countless black butterflies rustled and flew toward the front of the crowd. Everyone looked up one after another. The timid ones hastily dodged those butterflies, while the braver ones crouched on the ground and craned their necks to watch. A 5 or 6-year-old child widened her round eyes and suddenly reached out to grab a butterfly that flew past her eyes. Unexpectedly, her mother's expression changed, and she hastily slapped the child's soft hand. She pulled her over and whispered, "Don't touch." The child's fingers hurt, and she opened her mouth to cry. That young mother was so frightened that her face turned pale. She hastily covered the child's small mouth with her hand and repeatedly shouted into her ear, "Don't make a sound." Arbor's gaze landed on the mother and daughter. He creased his brows and pattered toward that young mother. That young woman's pupils contracted in fright. Just as she was about to kneel down in terror, she suddenly felt her arm tighten, and someone pulled her hand away. "Wah!" The little boy's cries immediately resounded, causing everyone's hearts to tighten, and they couldn't sit still. "Why are you covering her for?" Arbor glanced at that young mother in displeasure. He looked down and saw that the child's mouth and nose were already a bit red from being covered. "So sorry." That young woman only realized that she was a bit funny after saying that what did she do wrong to this little stoic in front of her? She was almost scared to death by them. She was afraid that her child would make a fuss and provoke the disgust of these mighty figures in front of her, and be killed as if they were trash. After all, ordinary people like them were not cultivators. Their lives were very fragile. Arbor reached out and stroked the child's head. He tilted his head and thought for a moment. Then, he took out a box of pastries from his inner world and handed it to the crying child. Go ahead. Emolien, who had followed her over, nearly laughed out loud. He knew this little fellow too well. She actually wanted to use food to shut the child's mouth. After all, this was how the little fellow had dealt with the noisy little monk earlier. This trick had always worked on children. Sure enough, the gagged little ghost finally stopped crying. Arbor motioned for the young woman to bring the child to the side, and his gaze followed the crowd. In this short period of time, the crowd at the north gate began to disperse to the left and right. There was no other reason. That flock of small black butterflies was circling around a man in clusters. When the others saw this, although they didn't understand what was going on, they still very perceptively retreated. There was a 3-meter square empty space in the middle, and only that simple and honest-looking man with a shoulder pole was vigorously swinging the flock of butterflies in front of him. Chapter 3393. Go away. With an abnormal expression, the man forcefully waved the butterflies in front of him and bellowed, Hurry and go away. Go away. Arbor coldly gazed at him, her gaze so focused that it was as if she was examining a fresh corpse. She didn't seem to move much, but she had already arrived in front of the man carrying the carrying pole. At this moment, the honest-looking man carrying the carrying pole no longer pretended to be carrying it. At some point in time, he had tossed the carrying pole to the ground. At this moment, he was completely focused and nervously stirring the butterflies with his hands. Suddenly, his gaze met Arbor's, and he couldn't help but shudder from the coldness in this little girl's eyes. The depths of this girl's eyes didn't seem to contain the slightest hint of life. It was so gloomy and cold that it evoked a trace of fear from the bottom of one's heart. Arbor's fingers moved, and a tender green vine snaked upward and wrapped around the honest-looking man's neck with a swish. An extremely cold voice quietly rose next to the man's ear. Speak, where did you settle the person? The man quivered and trembled several times, but he bit his lip and refused to speak. Arbor ruthlessly lashed the man's face with her vine whip. Pa! A heavy sound rang out, and the northern city gate immediately fell into a deathly silence. No one dared to even breathe loudly. Dictum talisman. Arbor's eyes emitted a cold glint as she icily said, You will pay a great price for everything you've done. She had no intention of wasting words with this person, and directly activated the dictum talisman, wanting him to tell the truth. But a silver light suddenly flashed in front of the man. As soon as the jade talisman was activated, talisman energy abruptly seeped into the man's mind and immediately took control of him. Who are you? I am a disciple of the Panga clan. The Panga clan. Arbor's eyes narrowed dangerously. She slightly waved the vine whip in her hand twice, and then turned to instruct Huifeng. Have these people leave the city and enter the city. Disperse. Yes. Huifeng waved his hand, and the young city guard immediately understood. He hastily bowed and hastily arranged for people to open the city gates. The city gates opened very quickly. Everyone was like birds startled by the twang of a bow. Now that they were allowed to leave, who wouldn't hurry and run? They immediately exited the city and left like a swarm of bees. The young mother mixed in with the crowd and hurriedly carried her child out of the city. The little boy was still holding the box of pastries in his hands. He leaned on his mother's shoulder and waved at Arbor happily to say goodbye. However, Arbor's attention was completely focused on the man, so he didn't see this scene. On the other hand, the crown prince, the young guard, and the others were amused when they saw this. This was probably a farewell thank you from a foodie. Soon, only the city guards were left at the north gate. The rest of the commoners had already run away. Only a few of the braver ones stayed behind. Hiding in the corner to watch the show, there were some smart ones among these people who had long realized that this young crown princess didn't have any intention of harming anyone. So they stayed behind to watch the show. The crown princess and His Highness the Crown Prince definitely wouldn't pay them any attention. The young crown princess's purpose on this trip was to deal with this simple and honest man in front of her. At this time, the man who had been hit by the dictum talisman had already poured out everything he knew like beans from a bamboo tube. Arbor pinched the small hair clip and gazed coldly at the man. Chapter 3394. Arbor took out the thin letter and shook it in front of the man. Tell me, why did they ask me to go to Rouge Pavilion? There was a small line of words on the letter. If you want your sister's life to be safe, gather at Rouge Pavilion today. My clansmen want to make a deal with you. Your life in exchange for hers. The simple and honest man answered the question mechanically, his eyes showing a bit of sluggishness. Prince Mo's eyes were instantly filled with anger, but he suppressed it and did not explode. He only stared coldly at the ignorant honest man. A life in exchange for a life? Who came up with this idea? The man shook his head. I don't know. I'm only here to send the message. But he never expected that he would be so unlucky after using the teleportation talisman array to leave the banquet. He had been teleported 3 times in a row, but he had not been teleported out of Dragonflame City. He had been going in circles in the city, even he couldn't believe that his face was so dark today. His teleportation talisman array could only teleport him 3 times in a row. After 3 times, he had snuck near the North City gate, planning to take the opportunity to sneak out of the city. He did not expect the little crown princess and the crown prince to arrive so quickly. He was completely caught off guard. Arbor said coldly, "Hand over your teleportation talisman." Arbor glanced at the honest man and reached out to pat him. The man's expression showed that he was struggling. Then, he took out the 24 yellow teleportation talismans. Xiaomu snatched it over, and the blue spiritual cleansing fire that shot out of her palm burned that talisman matrix to ashes in a matter of minutes. The vine wrapped around her fingers retracted back to her wrist. Arbor stared coldly at the honest man in front of him and said sternly, "Are you curious why the teleportation talisman array has been making you go in circles in Dragonflame City?" She flicked her finger and immediately undid the dictum talisman on the man. He had been bound by the dictum talisman for a long time. Even after being unbound, the man's mind was still muddled and not very bright. But when he met Arbor's ice soul pearl eyes, he couldn't help but shudder, and his mind suddenly became much clearer. From the day I entered Dragonflame City, I set up confinement talisman arrays in several places inside and outside the city. You can't escape, Arbor said coldly. This guy's teleportation rune array was too low level to break through the confinement rune array below Arbor. Therefore, Arbor knew very well that as long as he closed the city gates, he would be able to catch a turtle in a jar. This person would not be able to escape. That simple and honest man finally came back to his senses and hurriedly knelt down to beg for mercy. "Crown Princess, please spare my life. Crown Princess, this lowly one is only following orders. Crown Princess, please spare my life. Crown Princess, please, Pa." A green vine struck the man's face like a bolt of lightning, causing him to cry out in pain. His entire body fell backwards, rolling on the ground as he cried out in pain. Arbor's cold and sharp gaze locked onto the man. His stoic face was filled with coldness. "If even half a strand of hair on my sister's head is missing, I will kill every member of the Panga clan, never to be reincarnated." The simple and honest man crawled on the ground, his pupils constricting. He felt the cold air all over his body rushing out, and a terrifying chill came from his heart. He knew very well that the little crown princess did not seem to be joking. This time, the Panga clan was probably in for a great disaster. Chapter 3395. Divine Land Border City, 90,000 li. Inside the Panga clan's camp in the Aurora Sand Land, there was nothing but yellow sand as far as the eye could see. The howling wind seemed to be singing a mournful and tragic song. The sand swirled and scattered in all directions by the messy wind, and dust swirled in the air. Jing Minyao held a horsewhip and forcefully lifted the curtain, looking darkly at the little girl tied to the pillar in the middle of the tent. The little girl was about 12 years old. She was wearing a fine satin dress, but at this moment, it was so dirty that its original color couldn't be seen. Her black eyes were fiercely glaring at Jing Minyao in front of her, and she coldly said, "Kill me if you have the guts. I still respect you as a person, But I really look down on you for being so hesitant and indecisive. Bitch! Jing Mingyao suddenly swung the whip in her hand at the little girl's face. If I lose a single strand of hair, my sister will definitely take the lives of your entire family. Your entire clan will fall into eternal damnation, never to be reincarnated. The little girl hysterically roared. Jing Mingyao! An iron lock drilled in from outside the curtain and instantly entangled the horsewhip that Jing Mingyao swung over. With a little force, the horsewhip in Jing Mingyao's hand was rolled and pulled, flying out of her hand and hanging on the screen next to her with a whoosh. Jing Linyao rushed in with large strides, and without any explanation, a heavy slap landed on Jing Mingyao's face. You beast, what did you do? 2 days ago, she found out that her third sister had caught a little girl from somewhere and locked her up in a tent. At first, she didn't think much of it. After all, with her third sister's brutal temperament, whenever she saw a little girl who was more beautiful than her on the road, she would capture her and bring her back to cripple and kill her. This kind of thing had happened too many times in the past. She, Jing Linyao, was not a saint and couldn't meddle in everything. Therefore, she didn't even inquire about it before. Today, she accidentally learned from the conversation between two servants that the little girl who was captured was actually captured from the Seacone planet in the lower star region. At that time, her heart slightly thumped, and she hurriedly sent someone to investigate. When she found out the little girl's identity, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She could hardly believe her ears. Jing Mingyao, this idiot, actually captured Arbor's sister? Although this sister was not related to her by blood, and was only a child of her adoptive parents, she had long known that Arbor did not have a good relationship with the Mu family. On the contrary, she was very close to her adoptive parents. This idiot did kidnap someone's sister. He was going to roast the entire Panga clan on the grill. Wasn't he? Let him go. Jing Linyao shouted angrily. Jing Mingyao's eyes flashed with a trace of hatred. She slapped her sister with the back of her hand. Get lost. Do I need you to tell me what to do? Are you trying to bury the entire Panga clan because of your stupidity? Heh. Although Arbor was the crown princess of Shenzhou, this child had nothing to do with the imperial family of Shenzhou. Do you think that the emperor of the divine land will attack the Panga clan for the village girls in the lower space zone? Haha. Ha. Don't joke around. How can a mere Arbor annihilate 200,000 people of the Panga clan? What nonsense are you talking about? Jing Linyao raised her hand and wanted to slap her again. But this time, Jing Mingyao was prepared. Chapter 3396. She grabbed Jing Linyao's hand, her eyes flashing with ruthless anger. Jing Linyao, with your current cultivation level, do you still think you can order me around? Jing Mingyao forcefully shook off her hand. Because she used too much strength, Jing Linyao actually staggered and her eyes narrowed dangerously. This third sister of hers was quite capable now. Ever since she used a special method to enter the level 3 Divine Master realm, her courage had increased by quite a bit. Jing Mingyao shook off Jing Linyao's hand and fiercely glared at her. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs. Father is away from home. I'm your eldest sister, so I can meddle in your improper behavior, Jing Linyao coldly said. Who would have thought that as soon as she finished speaking, Jing Mingyao would reach out and clap her hands twice. A large number of guards immediately swarmed into the tent and surrounded Jing Linyao. Invite our Panga clan's Princess Jing to leave. Jing Mingyao's eyes were filled with mockery as she said, for the next 2 days, ask her to stay in her tent and not come out again. Jing Linyao turned to look at the guards and revealed a bitter and sarcastic smile. I didn't expect that father would hand over the guards of the outstanding talents camp to you. How much did her father favor this youngest daughter of his? Eldest sister, I advise you not to resist, Jing Mingyao coldly said. Otherwise, who knows what will happen? Yo, what's going on here? Jing Qiao walked into the tent in a brocade robe and was slightly startled when she saw the scene in front of her. Jing Qiao's face could only be described as delicate and pretty, far from her eldest sister's graceful and dignified appearance, much less her youngest sister's quick-witted beauty. She simply combed her long hair and braided it down to her chest. When she walked into the tent, she showed a hint of confusion in her eyes. She smiled and tried to smooth things over. Little sister, big sister, what's wrong with you? Jing Minyao, I advise you to think carefully. Jing Linyao coldly laughed. Arbor isn't an easy person to deal with. You captured her sister, so she definitely won't let you off. Jing Minyao's lips curled and she coldly snorted. Don't scare me. Who captured her sister? It's just a coincidence. Jing Minyao was halfway through her words when she suddenly snorted and waved her hand. What are you still standing there for? Please ask Princess Jing to leave. Jing Minyao, don't blame me for not warning you. If you let that little girl have one more lash mark on her body, with Arbor's ruthless temperament, he will definitely make 10 or 100 times more lash marks on your body. Although Jing Minyao watched Jing Linyao leave with cold eyes, her heart trembled slightly for no reason. When she turned around and met Jolin's angry big eyes, Jing Minyao felt a wave of nausea in her heart. She waved her hand and said, "Watch her carefully." Then he strode out of the tent. Jing Qiao turned around and looked at Jolin curiously before following him out. Third sister, where did you catch this kid? It's none of your business. Jing Minyao flew into a rage out of humiliation and left. On the other side, Jing Linyao was escorted to a tent by several guards. Princess, please. Jing Linyao coldly stared at the guards in front of her, her face full of resentment. Do you think this is being loyal to your duty? Father didn't give you to her to do as she pleases. You're accomplices to a villain, helping her mess around. In the end, you'll only harm the lives of your entire clan. The guards looked at each other in dismay. Chapter 3397. Why aren't you telling us what's going on? Third Miss wasn't the one who caught the girl, one of the guards said. 2 days ago, when Third Miss went for a walk in the Haga district, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared and threw the girl to Third Mississippi. That man also said that he ran into someone sent by Captain Jing to investigate on Seekong planet in the lower star zone. The men sent by Guard Commander Jing have all been killed. The guard spilled the beans like a bamboo tube. He made a prompt decision to capture the Crown Princess' younger sister. That's why he was able to escape in such a dangerous situation. We also felt that this matter was very strange. However, when Third Miss heard that the girl was the younger sister of the Crown Princess of the Divine Province, she insisted on doing it and didn't listen to anyone's advice at all. Our spies in the imperial capital of the Divine Province should have already made their move. What move? Jing Linyao suddenly had a bad premonition, and her entire body tensed up. The guard lowered his head and whispered, "Yesterday, I heard that Third Miss sent the spy in the imperial capital to deliver a letter to the Crown Princess." Jing Linyao's eyes widened in shock, and she immediately walked out of the tent. The guards hurriedly stopped her and said with shame, "Princess Jing, I'm sorry. We can't disobey Third Miss orders." Jing Linyao naturally knew that Outstanding Talent Camp only obeyed the orders of the person holding the tablet. Now that the tablet was in Jing Minyao's hands, the people of Outstanding Talent Camp would only listen to her orders. Jing Linyao nodded and clenched her fists. She said coldly, "I know you have your difficulties, but you have to believe me. If you don't let me out to make arrangements, the Aurora Desert will be destroyed overnight. All the members of the Panga clan will be annihilated." She knew the young Crown Princess too well. When they first met in Shuntian Prefecture, the young Crown Princess was determined to execute Jing Minyao with her own hands. The Crown Princess had never been a kind person. An eye for an eye. The Crown Princess definitely wouldn't let any of them off since Jing Minyao, this idiot, had kidnapped her younger sister. She had to go out and arrange everything. She couldn't imagine it. It was as if she could already see a sea of blood and corpses in front of her. "Princess Jing." The guards looked at each other and hesitantly reached out to stop her. "Believe me, if you don't let me out now, it'll be too late." Jing Linyao snapped. "If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." The guards looked at each other. Because of Princess Jing's prestige in the clan, they didn't dare to stop her and withdrew their hands at the same time. Jing Linyao got out of the tent and sent a signal to the sky. This was a signal to Jingjia. Although her father was not very reliable, Jing Linyao knew that only when her father came back, as soon as possible, could they stop the war that was about to start. Jing Minyao came out of her tent and pointed at Jing Linyao with a face full of resentment. Arrest her. Hundreds of outstanding talent camps guards rushed up and fought with the dozens of guards that came out from Jing Linyao's side. The scene was a bit chaotic. The tent was torn apart and several stoves that were placed outside the tent fell down one after another. The fire started to spread and accidentally set Jolin's tent on fire. Jing Linyao's expression changed greatly. She hurriedly shouted, "Go save her." Chapter 3398. At the same time, at Rouge Pavilion in Dragon Flame City, Arbor was already waiting in the lobby of Rouge Pavilion, before it was even evening. Guifeng quickly walked in and whispered something into the Crown Prince's ear. Prince Emo nodded and turned to look at Arbor. He held her small hand and said softly, "Everything has been arranged. We can leave immediately." Miss Chiao nodded expressionlessly and spat out 2 words from between her teeth. "No hurry." The shopkeeper of Rouge Pavilion was hiding behind the counter. He felt a burst of cold air above his head and couldn't help but shiver. Ever since the 2 distinguished guests brought in a group of black-clothed guards, the people in the store all ran out of the store tactfully. Although the young guard gave him a small bag of spirit coins and told him not to worry about it and to leave on his own, the shopkeeper still felt uneasy in his heart, as if something bad was about to happen. He chose to stay as long as the shop was still there and the people were still there. Right now, Xiaomu was not in the mood to care about the thoughts of irrelevant people. She held a flower cup in her hand, which emitted a faint cracking sound. Although no expression could be discerned from her face, she was abnormally furious on the inside, wanting to slaughter all of her enemies. These people were truly extraordinarily bold to dare go to the lower star sector to mess with her family. Good, very good. Since that was the case, she would let them clearly know the price they would have to pay for messing with her family. Guifeng lifted the curtain and walked inside. His sharp gaze met the Crown Prince's, and he gave a slight nod as he stepped to the side a couple of steps. A tall and sturdy man walked in with 3 or 4 attendants. Upon seeing the young Crown Princess, a smile appeared on that man's face. He laughed loudly and said, I've kept the Crown Princess waiting. This must be His Highness the Crown Prince." "Cut the crap." Arbor coldly interrupted him. "What conditions does the Panga clan want before you're willing to let them go? Speak." The burly man's expression changed slightly, and he chuckled awkwardly. "What are you saying, Crown Princess? What is our relationship with the Panga clan?" The little Crown Princess raised her hands slightly, and Huifeng clapped his hands, ordering someone to carry out the honest man from the Panga clan and throw him in front of the brawny man. "Is this your companion?" The muscular man's face changed slightly, and he looked up at Arbor in disbelief. This person was actually captured by them? How was this possible? Also, the man had revealed his identity as a member of the Panga clan? "You're called Carquin, right?" Arbor looked at him coldly. She moved her fingers, and the flower cup was crushed into powder in her palm. "Have you thought about how you will die?" Carquin's face slightly changed. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. After a while, the shopkeeper sent off the group of nobles with trepidation and received a small bag of spirit coins. He thanked them with tears of gratitude. Arbor ordered his men to bring Carquin and his men onto 7th Swallow's back. 500 purple forest guards were also with them. The Aurora Sand Ground was 90,000 kilometers away from the border city. With little 7's speed, it would take 7 to 8 days to get there. Arbor used the teleportation glyph array. After the glyph energy was depleted, she had little 7 carry them for a while. After the glyph energy was replenished, they continued to teleport. Just like that, everyone arrived at Clear Pass City outside the Aurora Sand Ground after a day. This city was the border between the Divine Land and the Aurora Sand Ground. Clear Pass City was very close to the Aurora Sand Ground. Even though it was called Clear Pass, it didn't feel fresh at all. The sandstorm here was extremely strong. Walking on the streets, there were people with headscarves hurriedly walking. Chapter 3399. There weren't many stalls on the streets either. After all, with such a strong sandstorm, they would only eat dust if they were placed on the streets. The most unique thing about Clear Pass City was that there were all kinds of mud kiln shops. These small shops built from mud sold medicinal herbs, talismans, and weapons. The entire street was filled with such small shops, and it looked quite prosperous. However, all the merchants who frequented this place knew that the prices of Clear Pass City's goods were not cheap. It could be said that the goods in Clear Pass City were more expensive than those in the nearby cities, but the goods were only average. Therefore, although the street was bustling with activity, the business was just so-so. It was fine to fool the foreign visitors, but the locals basically did not buy anything. On the other hand, the Panga clansmen would occasionally come to Clear Pass City to exchange for goods, so they were quite familiar with each other. Arbor's group of a few hundred people walking on the streets of Clear Pass City was naturally very eye-catching. She had someone release Ka Kuan and the others, and they led the way. It was not easy to find the right path in the Aurora Desert and the vast sea of sand. Arbor could send the little butterflies out to find it, but it would take some time. Finding a local to lead the way was the fastest way. When City Lord Huang of Clear Pass City heard the news and rushed over, Arbor had already found a local who could lead the way. City Lord Huang hurriedly knelt down and bowed, saying in fear and trepidation, "Your subject greets the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. I did not know that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess had come to Clear Pass. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you. We were just passing by," Emo Lien said indifferently, raising her hand to signal the middle-aged guide to come over. "This is your citizen. We need him to lead us to the Panga clan's territory." Yes. City Lord Huang nodded, but he was a little confused. "Your Highness, you are going to the Panga clan too. You don't have to worry about this." Emo Lien interrupted him, taking out an imperial token and waving it in front of him. "Transfer the border guards here. I will be in charge of them for the next 3 days." Yes. City Lord Huang did not dare to say no. He nodded and hurriedly ordered his men to do it. Arbor turned to look at Emo Lien and tugged at his sleeve. "Then I'll take them away first." Emo Lien nodded and stroked her hair. Although he knew that there wouldn't be any danger on this trip, he still reminded her, "Be careful. If you encounter any unforeseen circumstances, just wait for me to come and deal with it." "All right." Arbor nodded. He raised his hand to summon his fire phoenix, and the 500 purple forest guards leapt onto it. At this time, Ka Kuan's face was already ashen, extremely defeated. Ever since he found out that the Crown Princess and her entourage only took slightly more than a day to travel from the imperial capital to Border City, he had been in a state of confusion. The girl in front of him was simply terrifying. Deep down in Karkin's heart, he had a bad premonition. He seemed to be absent-minded. "I'm asking you a question." One of the purple forest guards shoved Kakin. "Why aren't you talking?" When Ka Kuan came back to his senses, he found that everyone was standing on a sandy ground. Arbor had already put the fire phoenix away. This place was filled with rolling sand and dust. Flying at high altitudes was not very suitable. It would be too troublesome for the fire phoenix. Furthermore, the guide said that it would take no more than 6 hours to reach the Panga clan's territory. Arbor decided to travel by land. The little fellow swallowed a flight pill and followed the guide expressionlessly. Chapter 3400. The little girl took out a large scarf and wrapped it around herself from head to toe, then floated behind the guide. At first glance, she looked like a spirit, causing the purple forest guards' mouths to twitch uncontrollably. The guide's name was Kiki, and he was a straightforward middle-aged man. Every time he wanted to talk to the little crown princess, he would turn around and see a cold, expressionless face. He instantly had the urge to not talk to the young crown prince consort anymore. The little girl's legs were off the ground, and her body was motionless as she floated behind him. It was a frightening sight. Kiki felt lucky that it was still daytime. If it was nighttime, he would have been scared to death. The purple forest guards all put on thin armor and followed behind the little crown princess. They walked for about 5 hours without saying a word. Kiki couldn't help but say, "Crown princess, there's a quicksand area ahead. You all need to be careful." After saying that, he couldn't help but want to roll his eyes. The little crown princess had been floating the entire time. She wasn't in danger of being sucked into the quicksand at all. How much longer until we reach? We'll reach it once we pass through the quicksand area, Kiki said. Everyone follow me. Don't wander off. Arbor continued to float behind Kiki. He turned to the Purple Forest guards and asked, "Do you want to come to the talisman?" The Purple Forest guard captain couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He shook his head and said, "No need, Crown Princess. They weren't that weak. What should they do?" The little Crown Princess was always worried that they would die, so she kept trying to hide them in the talisman. Arbor said, "Oh." He floated for a while, then lowered his head and said to Kiki, "Uncle Kiki, I'll put you in a storage talisman later. Don't worry, we'll let you out once we're done with the Panga clan." Kiki didn't quite understand, but he still nodded. Along the way, Kiki had some understanding of the little Crown Princess mystique. When Xiaomu saw the continuous stretch of tents in the distance, she narrowed her eyes and gazed at the thick wall of sand outside the camp. The wall of sand was piled up by 100 years of wind and sand. It was about 10 meters tall and surrounded the entire territory of the Panga clan. On one hand, it could fend off the sandstorm, and on the other hand, it could fend off some beasts in the sand. It was just that this kind of living environment, compared to Clear Pass City, was still very unsightly. Jing Linyao had always wanted to enter the Divine Prefecture. It was also because of the continuous sinking of the desert in recent years. Chances were that in a few years, the entire Aurora Desert would collapse. By then, the Panga clan would not even have a place to live. Kiki was very experienced. In less than 15 minutes, he had led the Purple Forest guards out of the quicksand area. He pointed at a nearby wall of sand and said, "Over there." Arbor nodded and put Kiki into the storage talisman, temporarily throwing him into the inner world. "You can come out now." Following the little stoic's voice, several figures suddenly appeared behind her. Ma Ta, Ko Hongwen, Qi Xianxian Situ Yi, Liang Qingqing. The Purple Forest guards all widened their eyes. They should have thought of it earlier. The Crown Princess must have brought a lot of people with her, since she possessed a treasure like a storage talisman. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure flashed. He waved a pink little fan and said with a grin, "Ah, the sandstorm here is really strong. This venerable one's eyes are red from the wind." Chapter 3401. As he spoke, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal tugged at the little stoic's scarf. "Jojo, why are you wrapping yourself up so tightly? I can't even see the little stoic's face anymore. Come quickly, lend me a small piece to cover my face." Because the sandstorm was unbearably strong, Arbor then covered her small face with 2 or 3 scarves, revealing a pair of bright, rolling eyes that were as cold as ice. The more the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at her, the more interested he found her. He couldn't resist teasing this little girl. After snatching a scarf to cover his face, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal quietly asked, "Jojo, are we going to charge in and fight now?" Arbor shook her small head and solemnly gazed at the camp behind the sand wall. "Why are we still wasting words with them? Let's charge in and capture the main culprit, and give her a death by 1,000 cuts. I'm sure she'll be willing to hand over Jojo's younger sister." The Peony Fairy flipped a strand of her hair flirtatiously and slandered with a chuckle. Arbor raised her hand and expressionlessly blocked this group of fellows who wanted to charge into the camp. She raised her hands slightly, and countless light gray little sand scorpions abruptly flowed out from between her fingers. They rustled as they crawled in the sand. Little by little, they accumulated into an ocean, and gradually, they densely covered the sky and earth like a sea of scorpions, enclosing half of the entire camp. The Peony Fairy's scalp tingled as she watched. She reflexively took a small step back and coughed. Fuck. Charging in to capture people and beat them to death was a more humane method of punishment. Right, Jojo? This guy didn't want to do anything at all? He first surrounded them with sand scorpions, then he would definitely take the next step. He was angry. Sir Jojo must be very angry right now. Everyone took a small step back in unison. Only the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal moved 2 inches closer to Xiaomu while waving his pink little red fan. He winked and said with a smile, "People will definitely flee outside in a while. Let's use vines to circle around the sand wall." Arbor had the same idea. She turned to look at him and nodded vigorously. Ma Ancient raised her hand, and a wood spirit shot out, landing on the towering sand wall in front of her. Soon, the wood spirit formed a winding vine and began to take root and sprout, spreading in all directions. Everyone felt as if a visual feast had appeared in front of them. This was the power of a transcendent god to control the 5 spirits. The originally slow-growing vines, with the help of Sheng Chen's saint energy, rapidly extended their branches and leaves, covering the sky and covering the earth, rapidly spreading out outside the earthen wall. With an incomparable suppressive force, it circled the entire camp several times and extended into the sky. After only 15 minutes, the entire territory of the Panga clan was enshrouded in vines. The tiny sand scorpions crawled in through the gaps in the vines. More and more of them swarmed in. When the people in the territory of the Panga clan realized that something was wrong, most of them were too scared to come out of their tents. The intertwining vines as thick as the mouth of a bowl propped up a giant roof in the territory of the Panga clan, covering the sky and the sun. As for the soldiers who were patrolling outside the tents, when they realized that something was wrong, they quickly ran toward 3rd Miss Jing's tent. On the way, they encountered a large number of sand scorpions and were forced into a bitter battle. There was no lack of cultivators among the soldiers, but most of them were low-level spiritual masters. The defense and attack of each of these tiny sand scorpions were comparable to that of a level 6 spiritual master. Chapter 3402. Although their levels were not high, they were enough to deal with most of the guards. Moreover, they were so dense that they covered the sky and the earth, giving people a feeling of fear at first glance. Arbor pursed her lips and looked coldly at the Panga clan's land. Her voice was crisp and cold, like spring water dripping from a snowy mountain, every word smashing into the depths of people's hearts. Patriarch of the Jing family come out. Jing Linyao, who was imprisoned in a tent and anxiously wiping the face of a girl on the bed, subconsciously shrank her fingers when she heard Arbor's voice. His eyes immediately revealed a look of shock. She rushed to the entrance of the tent, only to see an overwhelming number of sand scorpions crawling in the clan's land. Some soldiers resisted, but were immediately swept into the sand scorpions and drowned into pieces. However, if they did not fight with the sand scorpions would not bite them wantonly. Instead, they drove the Panga soldiers to an open space. A guard of the Pride camp ran in a panic and hurriedly said, "Princess, it's not good. Strong enemies are invading. What should we do now?" Jing Linyao was already shocked beyond words. She knew very well that it would take the fastest flying beast 7 or 8 days to reach the Panga clan's land from Dragon Flame City. But the crown princess arrived in 2 days? What was going on? She turned to look at Jolin, who was lying motionless on the bed, and frowned. Ever since the day of the fire, Jolin had been hit by Jing Minyao when she struggled to escape and was severely injured. She had been in a coma for the past 2 days. Jing Linyao wanted to wake the girl up, but she had fed her all kinds of medicine, but it was not very effective. She even asked the witch doctor to check on Jolin, but the answer she got was that the girl was likely to die. It was obvious how heavy Jing Minyao's slap was. After all, one was a little girl who had not even reached the spiritual realm, while the other was a level 3 divine master. The difference in strength was too great. Jing Linyao took a deep breath and turned to look at the soldier. "Father, have you arrived?" The latter shook his head. Jing Linyao quickly walked to the bed and helped Jolin up. The curtain of the tent was suddenly lifted up high by someone and then lowered down. Jing Minyao spun in front of Qiao Lin like a storm, grabbed Qiao Lin's wrist, and shouted at the pale-faced guards behind her, "Drag her out." "Jing Minyao, what are you doing?" Jing Linyao was so angry that she hurriedly reached out to stop her. If it wasn't for this brainless person courting death like this, how could the entire clan have fallen into such a state? "It's none of your business." Min, Madam Jing, Wang Limeng, ran into the tent in a panic. Pointing at the sand outside, she said with a frightened face, "Outside, there are scorpions outside. What's going on?" "Your good daughter has captured the younger sister of the crown princess of Shenzhou. Now that she has brought people to attack us, She still refuses to admit defeat and wants to continue to cause trouble. Madame Jing looked at her daughter in shock. Min Min, is it true? Her gaze fell on the unconscious Xiaolin on the bed. It's her. Mother, don't get involved in this matter. How can mother not get involved? How many more people do you want to kill with your willfulness? Jing Qiao angrily followed them in. She lifted the tent flap and let them see the sand scorpions that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Chapter 3403. Do you see? There are scorpions everywhere, we have nowhere to run. Jing Qiao angrily put down the curtain and said harshly, How long do you want to be willful? Do you want the whole clan to pay with their lives because of your willfulness? Qiao, Wang Liming angrily shouted. How can you talk to your sister like that? Wang Liming loved her youngest daughter the most. Of course she couldn't bear to see other people scold her beloved. Jing Mingyao was also very angry. She couldn't help but take 2 steps forward, pointing at Jing Qiao and reprimanding. How dare you? Don't say you're a member of the Panga clan's Jing family when you go out. Father's face is about to be lost because of you. You. Jing Qiao angrily glared. Jing Mingyao continued to scold. Why are you panicking? Of course I have a plan. I've already sent 2 consecrators to deal with it. Consecrator Jiang and Consecrator Lan are both level 9 of the deity realm. What can't be settled? What a joke. What's the hurry? Jing Lingyao's eyes were suppressing traces of anger. These sand scorpions must have been brought here by the crown princess. Right now the other party is only releasing sand scorpions to surround us. They don't have the intention to harm us. If you rashly resist, I believe that by then you'll enrage her further, and by then it'll be out of control. When did our Panga clan's Princess Jing become such a coward? Jing Mingyao sneered at her mockingly. At the same time, the 2 consecrators of the Panga clan broke through the surrounding vines and suddenly rushed out of the gate. Before they could move, they both felt their legs go numb. Lowering their heads, they saw that their legs had been tightly entangled by the vines. The 2 consecrators instantly lost their balance, and their entire bodies were pulled downwards. Their hearts sank at the same time. Small vines could hold 2 deity realm experts? There was no other reason. It must be that the other party's control of the 5 spirits was more powerful than theirs. Who are you? The 2 consecrators calmed down. One of them, Consecrator Lan, who was at the peak of level 9 of the deity realm, spoke. Consecrator Jiang, on the other hand, looked at the group of people in arbor with a straight face. His heart skipped a beat when he saw it. The formation of the opposing team seemed to be a little unpredictable. There was no need to mention this little stoic girl. This girl looked young at a glance, so no matter how high her cultivation was, it couldn't be that high. However, just the red-robed man standing beside her with a smile on his face was enough to make one unable to estimate his cultivation base. Even with Consecrator Zhang's eyesight, he was unable to see through the other party's cultivation. This made him suspicious, and at the same time, a bad premonition arose in his heart. Not to mention, behind the red-clothed man, there were 2 smiling and flirtatious women. It was a half-bald Duda with disheveled hair and slovenly appearance. They were a pair of twin brothers, and one of them was a smiling young man who was holding a saber. Consecrator Zhang's pupils constricted slightly. His gaze shifted to the side and landed on an 8 or 9-year-old boy who was looking at him coldly with pursed lips. This boy looked quite young, but the vicissitudes of life in his eyes were frightening. Who were these people? The ethereal and frightening aura on their bodies didn't seem to come from deity realm cultivation. Consecrator Jiang suddenly regretted coming out to be the bird that stood out. He felt that today's matter was most likely going to get worse. Chapter 3404. This feeling expanded even more clearly in her heart the instant she saw Consecrator Lan being flung away nimbly by a vine. The vine in Shurchen's hand tightened slightly, dragging the wailing Consecrator Lan to her side, and heavily landing him on the ground. Consecrator Jiang didn't dare to be careless anymore. He hastily landed on the ground and bowed very respectfully. Seniors, may there be some misunderstanding for you to suddenly visit the Panga clan? Shurchen unhurriedly tightened the vine around Consecrator Lan's wrist. Like a dead dog, Consecrated Lawn was dragged in front of the stoic-faced little crown princess. "Tell your clan leader to come out," Arbor said impatiently. "Don't waste any more time. There isn't much time left for you." Consecrator Zhang's heart skipped a beat, and he turned to look at the little stoic. "The clan leader left our clan's land a few days ago for an important matter." A ruthless glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. "All right then." Consecrator Jiang saw her expression abruptly change and inwardly cursed. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the little stoic girl coldly shout, "All Purple Forest Guards, listen up. Present. Charge in with me. Kill all those who resist without mercy." She didn't have that much time to waste here with them. She seemed to have sensed that Xiao Lin-er's situation wasn't good. For some reason, her eyelids kept twitching, and she felt that Xiao Lin-er was in danger right now. "Wait!" Consecrated Jiang couldn't resist shouting. "Princess! Our Princess Jing is here. You can speak with our Princess Jing if you need anything." Arbor abruptly turned her head, and her cold, electrifying gaze landed on him. Her patience had been completely exhausted. Even if the Jing clan's clan leader, Jing Ti, was standing in front of her right now, she didn't want to waste any more words with him. "Kill, kill, kill." The voices of the 500 Purple Forest Guards shook half the sky. Consecrator Jiang only felt his heart tremble slightly, and he hastily shouted, "No, wait a moment. Our clan's land still has a lot of the people inside. Listen up. I don't want to kill the innocent. If you stay in the tent obediently, I can spare your lives. Anyone who leaves the tent to resist will be treated as an enemy of this crown princess. Kill them all." Arbor opened his hand, and a large number of fiery evil mosquitoes swarmed out of the 100 Poison Valley. They flapped their wings and buzzed as they flew towards the camp. Soon after, hundreds and thousands of explosive birds also rushed out. They let out a series of cries and flew through the gaps between the vines like a swarm of bees, besieging the soldiers of the Proud Heroes Battalion, who were desperately resisting the sand scorpions. Bang, bang, bang. These suicidal little things instantly exploded in the barracks, causing waves of miserable howls. More than half of the members of the Panga clan were hiding in their tents, not even having the courage to extend their heads out. All he could hear were the sounds of soldiers struggling to put up a desperate struggle, as well as the screams of agony. Sounds of phoenix chirping could be heard. Qing Wan and Huofeng were the first to enter through the broken vines. He opened his mouth, and a stream of fire and ice beads shot towards the soldiers of the Proud Arrogance Battalion. Ah! The soldiers of the Proud Heroes Battalion who were struggling to resist the sand scorpions under their feet, a swarm of fiery evil mosquitoes, and explosive birds, were caught off guard and hit by the attack. Arbor led the crowd to kill their way in. As long as they saw anyone who blocked their way, they would cripple them regardless of the consequences. Chapter 3405. She didn't have the time to waste on these miscellaneous people right now. She was simply burning with worry. The fury in her heart was about to completely engulf this place. She increasingly felt that Xiao Lin-er's breathing was weakening. It wasn't a misconception. Xiao Lin-er was definitely in trouble. On the other side, Jing Minyao saw that the situation wasn't right, and immediately pulled up Xiao Lin, who was lying on the bed, out of the tent, running towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. Upon seeing this, Wang Liming and Jing Qiao also followed after her. Meanwhile, Jing Linyao was so anxious that she stomped her feet and charged out with 100 personal guards. Her heart ached incessantly when she saw the corpses of the Proud Pride Camp's soldiers lying around. This was all Jing Minyao, this brainless woman's fault. How many innocent soldiers had died because of her momentary willfulness? What right did she have to be so willful and reckless, making the innocent pay such a painful price for her willfulness? The more Jing Linyao thought about it, the angrier she became. She charged out of the tent with 100 personal guards, and did her best to confront the swarm of evil fiery poisonous mosquitoes. Seeing her personal guards die one by one in the suicidal explosions of the explosive birds, Jing Linyao shouted angrily, Arbor! Arbor! Get out here!" After she finished roaring out a string of curses, she turned around. Her face and body were covered in blood, and her eyes furiously met the little stoic's expressionless and cold face. She was standing far away on the other side of the sandy slope, staring at her with a cold expression. Her expression was like an ice-cold jade sculpture, without the slightest bit of human emotion. No, that wasn't it. It should be said that she didn't have the slightest bit of emotion towards strangers like them. She stood there like a jade sculpture, staring at others as if she was looking at corpses. Perhaps right now, she was looking at a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Other than the people beside her, everyone else was her enemy. Stop. Stop. What did they do wrong? They were only following orders. The person who truly captured your younger sister is Jing Minyao. She's already running towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. It's useless even if you kill them all. Over half of the Proud Pride camp's 10,000 soldiers were dead or injured. Jing Linyao looked at the tragic scene in front of her and painfully closed her eyes. What right or wrong can there be in a war between two armies? Xiao Mu gazed icily at Jing Linyao, and she remarked indifferently from across the sandy ground. You still claim to be the invincible and victorious Princess Jing in vain. When you were 12 years old, you led your clansmen to defeat the 300,000-strong giant demon clan army. Didn't you kill anyone? Our positions are different. Why are you talking to me about right and wrong? Because it is your people who are dying right now. They are the heroes that the Panga clan raised after all the trouble. So you feel sorry for them, don't you? Xiao Mu's icy voice landed on Jing Linyao's heart word by word, causing her to involuntarily shudder all over. That seemed to be the case. But to be said so mercilessly like this, it was really irritating. With a wry smile, Jing Linyao summoned a long sword from her sense pool and said coldly, Jing Linyao, please fight with the crown princess of the divine land. Arbor's eyes narrowed. With a swipe of her left hand, a thunderbolt sword that was flickering with purple light fell into her hand. Her fair little hand stroked the tip of the sword and gently flicked it. With a boom, it seemed to shatter everyone's ears. Even the swarm of fiery evil mosquitoes flying in the air couldn't help but retreat. Chapter 3406. A few days ago, her Spirit Division Record Soul chapter had advanced to the 9th level, and her Spirit Meridians had formed a 9th branch meridian. As for the Technique chapter, she specifically practiced swordsmanship in order to complement the Thunderclap sword. Today, it just so happened that she was going to test out this extremely powerful Jing Linyao. Jing Linyao was a peak level 15 spiritual master with a level 8 spiritual fire. In the Divine Province, she could be considered a rather outstanding genius among women. However, the person she wanted to challenge today was Arbor, a little monster whose talent was close to monstrous. Jing Linyao took a deep breath, and the spirit sword in her hand was enveloped in a layer of fire. Her body suddenly moved, and she swept toward Arbor like a bolt of lightning. Bam! The two swords heavily collided. An enormous force radiated from Jing Linyao's arm. Jichen raised her brows slightly. On the side, Dao Wuji couldn't resist applauding and cheering. Good, good. Princess Jing's move is like splitting mountains and breaking seas. It's immensely powerful. Everyone simultaneously turned to glare at him. Which country was this dunce from? Dao Wuji rubbed his nose and glanced at Jichen ingratiatingly. Peach Blossom, I just feel that Princess Jing is evenly matched with the Little Crown Princess. Cough, she's worthy of being the Little Crown Princess's opponent. Everyone chuckled at him, then turned their heads to look at the field. In the billowing sandstorm in the barracks, two slender figures flew up and down, one on the left and one on the right. They had already exchanged over 100 moves. After exchanging blows with the little stoic, the more Jing Linyao fought, the more apprehensive she felt. This little stoic was young, but her attacks were very shrewd and ruthless. She didn't have any openings from head to toe. Moreover, she had only been using her sword up until now, and hadn't used any other assistance. Although her cultivation was inferior to Jing Linyao's, her actual combat strength far surpassed Jing Linyao's. Jing Linyao involuntarily chuckled bitterly, thinking that she had already lost. However, people were like this. The moment before admitting defeat, Jing Linyao still wanted to fight one more time. Crown Princess, if Jing Linyao defeats you, are you willing to agree to my withdrawal? Arbor glanced at her coldly. What's so difficult about that? Jing Linyao was secretly delighted. Without another word, she summoned a fire spirit and pointed in Arbor's direction. Go! The tip of her sword suddenly spat out a tongue of flame, like a wriggling giant snake suddenly opening its mouth and biting towards Arbor. Arbor's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he raised the Thundercrash sword in his hand and activated the incantation. The first move of the Thundercrash technique of the ninth heaven fell. Hundreds of lightning bolts suddenly exploded at the same time, forming a dazzling reddish-purple wheel in front of him. With a speed comparable to light, it quickly swept toward the giant snake phantom that Jing Linyao had waved out. The giant snake suddenly shattered into pieces inside the wheel. The wheel carried the terrifying power of thunder and lightning as it smashed towards Jing Linyao, who was slightly opening her mouth in front of her. In an instant, Jing Linyao was like a kite with a broken string. She was sent flying by the wheel. She fell heavily on the dusty ground and ate a mouthful of hot sand. Her expression was still somewhat dull and sluggish. She had no idea what had happened at all. One move. Lost. Jing Linyao was slightly alarmed. She coughed several times and propped herself up, wanting to sit up. However, at this very moment, she suddenly discovered that the meridians in her body were moving slightly. A majestic spiritual energy surged out of her body and instantly sucked in the spiritual energy from all directions. She was startled and promptly sat cross-legged, a trace of excitement surfacing in her eyes. Chapter 3407. After her battle with the young crown princess, she had unintentionally broken through to the peak and was about to break through to the divine realm. This sudden joy instantly drowned Jing Linyao. The few remaining personal guards by her side hurriedly ran forward and looked at Arbor with vigilance, guarding against her sudden attack. The young crown princess only looked deeply at Jing Linyao and then called for everyone to head towards the sandy slope that Jing Linyao had mentioned. Right now, she was burning with worry and didn't have the energy to find trouble with Jing Linyao. He led his men and ran towards the sandy slope behind the barracks. At a glance, she saw that there were many soldiers from the Pride camp lying in ambush in front of the sandy slope. Xiaomu waved her hand, and countless sand scorpions crawled over with rustling sounds. Whenever someone resisted, they would immediately surround that person and gnaw on them until not even their bones were left behind. When Jing Minyao saw that Arbor was chasing after them, she hurriedly carried Jolin, who was drooping her head, out from behind the slope. She hid behind a sand wall with a hole in it and looked at Arbor through the hole. Her voice was extremely sharp as she shouted at her, "Stop right there." Arbor clenched her small fists and saw Jolin, who had fallen into Jing Minyao's hands. Jolin's body seemed to be limp, and she seemed to be unconscious. "You're courting death." Arbor exploded with a roar and terrifying spiritual energy erupted from her body. It was as if layers of huge waves were crashing towards the sandy slope. Bang, 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 bang. The sandy slope was swept up by the spiritual energy, forming a sandstorm that was half the height of a person. The sandstorm swept towards Wang Liming and her daughters. Jing Qiao's cultivation was lacking, and she was the first to be knocked to the ground by the sandstorm. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face was pale with fright. She lay there, not daring to move. So terrifying. Did the young crown princess want to kill the three of them? Wang Liming was also shocked and cried out in alarm. "Crown princess, is there a misunderstanding? Let's talk things out." Min quickly released the crown prince consort's younger sister. "You didn't capture her in the first place." Wang Liming was badly frightened and hurriedly reminded her daughter. She had personally seen the young crown princess ruthlessly execute her daughter back then. At this moment, she no longer dared to provoke this vicious and merciless crown prince consort. She was afraid that today's matter wouldn't end peacefully. Her Min Wang Liming's face darkened, and her palms were sweating. She hoped that her master Jing Ming's return quickly. Master had a transcendent god realm cultivator by his side. That was their Jing clan's ancestor-level figure. As long as old master and that transcendent god realm cultivator rushed back, they would definitely be able to save Min's life. Yet Jing Minyao's eyes had already turned red from anger. She clutched Xiaolin's neck and hooted at Xiaomu. "You! If you don't stop, I'll break her neck immediately." Xiao Mu's eyes shot out wisps of venomous light, and she clenched her fists as she glared fixedly at Jing Minyao. She enunciated each word. You. Die. Freeze. Die. Whoosh! A stream of light flashed through the air, and everyone felt their vision blur. When Jing Minyao looked up again, she was horrified to find that Arbor, who was originally far away, was now standing right in front of her. She was only 3 inches away from her. She placed a small hand on her arm, causing Jing Minyao to tremble. Chapter 3408. It was as if an ice-cold venomous snake had crawled up her arm. That hand was as hard and firm as jade. It was ice-cold and emitted a chill. Jing Minyao opened her mouth slightly and let out a suppressed cry. She felt as if the little crown princess' 5 fingers that were squeezing her arm were about to crush her bones. Those 5 fingers that were as hard as iron clamped down on her arm, forcing her to let go of Jolin's neck inch by inch. Then, she was forced to raise her arm inch by inch. Wang Liming's frightened scream sounded in her ears. Jing Minyao discovered that her hand was uncontrollably bent in the opposite direction, until it was stretched to an angle that could not be stretched any further. A crisp crack sounded in her ears. The bones in her arm were broken. A piercing pain spread to her brain, causing Jing Minyao to let out a blood-curdling scream. Min! Wang Liming was about to rush forward. However, the peony fairy quickly walked over and tapped her to the ground. Big sister, you're wrong. Our Jojo is having a one-on-one duel with your daughter. How can you interfere and disregard the rules of the pugilistic world, and come up to mess things up? Wang Liming looked at Jing Minyao, who had fallen into Arbor's hands in horror. She kept praying in her heart that her master would come back soon. Come back soon, come back soon. Bam! Arbor ruthlessly punched Jing Minyao's nose. Wang Liming's eyes shrank in fear. She could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking coming from her daughter's face. Arbor reached out to take the limp Jolin, and quickly checked her pulse. A trace of fury surged in her eyes. She stared coldly at Jing Minyao and coldly ordered, "Tie her up." Then, she ignored her and directly carried Shaolin to the other side of the pit. She reached out and plucked a lustrous red bloodshed vermilion fruit from Paradise Planet. She took out a tray of holy water and placed the bloodshed vermilion fruit in it. Then, she took out a small knife that was as thin as a cicada's wing and cut open the very thin vermilion fruit with extreme speed and technique. He dug out half of the fruit and tore it open to feed Shaolin. After that, he had her eat half a fruit and gave her a small bottle of healing medicine. Then he reached out and massaged her chest and back for a while. He took out some silver needles and inserted them into several acupuncture points. Sister Peony. Go ahead, Jojo. The peony fairy ran to Arbor's side and looked at her with a smile. Help me look after my sister. In another 4 hours. Remember to feed the other half of the fruit to her for consumption. Let her eat the core when she wakes up. All right. The peony fairy nodded vigorously. Then she picked up Shaolin and ran back to the ginkgo fairy and the others. With Peony and Ginkgo looking after Shaolin, Arbor naturally felt at ease. Her cold eyes turned to Jing Minyao, who was tied to the side, and she shouted, "Guards of the Crown Princess, listen up. Yes, gather all the members of the Panga clan. Drag Jing Minyao into their camp. This Crown Princess wants to do it in front of everyone in the Panga clan. Deal with her personally." Yes. Wang Liming got up from the ground with great difficulty and shouted, "You dare? Do you think I dare?" Arbor looked at Wang Liming coldly. Then she waved her arm and shouted, "Tie her up." The purple forest guard swarmed forward and dragged Jing Minyao into the barracks like dragging a dead dog. Chapter 3409. Let go of me. Jing Minyao was dragged for a while. She turned around and saw the 2 consecrators who were tied up by vines and thrown to the side. Her eyes met Consecrator Zhang's, and she was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. Useless, all useless things. How could they not even beat Arbor? Consecrator Jiang was truly furious now. He now knew that such a big matter was caused by Jing Minyao's ignorance. If she hadn't captured his sister first, they wouldn't have been so bored as to come knocking on their door. Wasn't this entirely her own fault? Jing Minyao still had the face to glare at others now? Unrepentant. Consecrated Jiang also glared at Jing Minyao with a stern expression, his eyes so wide that they almost popped out of their sockets. Arbor, I'm telling you, don't mess around, Jing Minyao angrily reprimanded. My father will be back soon. If he sees you treat me like this, he definitely won't let you off. What are you doing? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Jing Minyao glared at the two purple forest guards. You still want to fight? Why don't you first consider whether you have the ability to withstand my father's anger before acting? A slap. One of the purple forest guards couldn't take it anymore and gave Jing Minyao a backhand slap, successfully shutting her up. You still dare to talk nonsense when you're about to die? The purple forest guard coldly glanced at her, then dragged her to a pillar and tied her up firmly, completely ignoring Jing Minyao's clamor. Jing Minyao was stunned for a few seconds by the purple forest guard's slap. Then she screamed again. Arbor, I won't accept it. Do you hear me? I won't accept it. I won't accept it. You must have used some kind of witchcraft just now. That's why you caught me off guard. I want to compete with you again. Let go of me. Do you dare to let go of me? Arbor. Jing Minyao felt that Arbor must have used some kind of powerful divine weapon to assist her. Otherwise, how could she appear in front of her in an instant, catching her off guard and subduing her? A thin vine as thick as a thumb shot out from Arbor's wrist, with thorns on it. Wang Liming was so frightened that her hair stood on end. She hurriedly took a few steps forward and knelt on the ground, crying and begging. Crown Princess, please spare me. The Crown Princess. It's Min Min's fault for not being sensible. It's my fault for not disciplining her properly. That's why Min Min is so willful. But now, your sister hasn't been hurt too much. Could you please ask the Crown Princess for my sake? Ah. Xiaomu swung her vine whip at her face with a backhand grip. Wang Liming rolled on the ground. Although her face avoided being hit by the vines, her shoulder was still hit. She felt the thorns tearing at her tender flesh, and she grimaced in pain. Madam Jing, you don't know how to teach your daughter. This Crown Princess will help you. Xiaomu berated expressionlessly. She then raised her wrist and lashed out several vine whips at Jing Minyao. Jing Minyao almost doubted life after being whipped by the barbed vine whip. She felt unbearable pain all over her body. From top to bottom, from head to toe, she couldn't help but tremble and twitch. Papa! Xiaomu didn't stop there, continuously lashing out several dozen vine whips at Jing Minyao. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When you kidnapped my sister, you didn't think this day would come, did you? Chapter 34:10. Jing Minyao. I seem to have warned you before. I told you not to have any crooked thoughts, and to stay away from me. I told you to know your place and behave yourself. You've turned a deaf ear to what I've said. Arbor whipped Jing Minyao's chest with her vine, causing the latter to let out a shrill scream. Arbor raised her vine whip slightly and lifted her chin. Her pair of beautiful eyes coldly stared at her, and she said indifferently, Can you die a second time? Do you think you can come back from the dead this time? Arbor leaned close to her ear and whispered, I seem to have asked you before. Do you want to die again? It seems that you've answered me perfectly with your actions. Jing Minyao shuddered slightly and looked at the expressionless little girl in front of her with a face full of fear. Her expression didn't change much from beginning to end, but in the bottom of her pair of eyes that were as black as a deep pool, terrifying saber light and sword shadows floated. People of the Panga clan, listen up. Arbor's cold voice was raised in the sky above the rolling sand and clearly fell into everyone's ears. Today, it was your Panga clan's third miss who captured this Crown Princess sister. In order to save her sister, this Crown Princess sent troops to your clan's land to exterminate the enemy. All of this was caused by the third miss of your clan. The entire sand was covered with heads, but no one dared to make the slightest sound. Arbor pointed her vine whip at the tied-up Jing Minyao and coldly said, No one can leave unscathed after hurting my family. Warriors of the divine land, my brothers and sisters, let me ask you, how am I going to deal with this woman? What price do I want her to pay? Xiaomu's icy gaze brushed past Jing Minyao, who was trembling with her head bowed, and she suddenly raised her voice to ask, Chop off her head! Chop off her head! Let her fall into the abyss of death for all eternity. Let her pay the price of blood. The price of blood. The purple forest guards shouted in unison. Although there were only 500 of them, their voices resounded throughout the 6 prefectures and 3 prefectures. Every word resounded in everyone's hearts, causing them to tremble in fear. Arbor raised his hand slightly, clenched his fingers into a fist and raised it high. All the voices disappeared in an instant. Everyone present felt as if their hearts were being crushed. It was as if the source of all the words they wanted to say had been extinguished. Jing Minyao abruptly raised her head and glared at Arbor. She violently twisted her bound body and screamed, "Arbor! Arbor! It's not Minmin's fault." Wang Liming scrambled over and stood in front of Jing Minyao. She cried out miserably, "It's really not Minmin's fault. Min, tell me the truth. Quickly tell the Crown Princess that you didn't kidnap the Crown Princess sister. You didn't do it." Jing Minyao seemed to have thought of something and laughed out loud. She glared at Arbor with resentment and said coldly, "You think you'll be fine after saving your sister? Ha 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 ha. I'll tell you the truth. The one who threw your sister into my hands is someone else." Xiaomu dashed forward and ruthlessly kicked Wang Liming aside. She then grabbed Jing Minyao's collar, her eyes emitting a chilly glint. "Speak. What do you mean?" She didn't know why, but there was an inexplicable panic in her heart, as if something bad was about to happen. Chapter 34:11. Speak. What do you mean? From Wang Liming's tone, it seemed like Jolin wasn't captured by Jing Minyao. Then why did she appear in the Panga clan's territory? Crown Princess, Crown Princess. Wang Liming hurriedly crawled forward and wailed loudly. Minmin really didn't capture him. Oh Minmin, don't argue with the Crown Princess. Hurry up and tell me everything you know. The Crown Princess is reasonable, and will definitely have her own judgment when the time comes. Arbor looked coldly at Wang Liming and didn't answer her. Wang Liming, this woman was truly laughable. Did she think that she would let her off after Jing Minyao revealed the truth? Was there such an easy thing in this world? Arbor loosened her fingers, and her gaze landed coldly on Jing Minyao. Are you going to confess yourself? Or do you want me to help you? Jing Minyao laughed heartily until she was out of breath. When that person threw your sister to me, he said. That person also said. When he threw your sister to me, he said that their people went to the lower star domain's Seacone planet to visit your adoptive parents. Ha 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 ha. Arbor, are you surprised? Are you pleasantly surprised? Some ants from the lower star domain, take a guess. How long can they resist? Arbor glanced at her indifferently. Seacone planet is restricted by heavenly Tao. Even if they go down, their cultivation will only be suppressed. It's already pretty good that they can reach peak mystic cultivator. So what? Peak mystic cultivator? That's enough to deal with your family, right? Ha 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 ha. Enough to deal with? Arbor couldn't help but sneer at her. But Jing Minyao didn't sense the coldness in her eyes. She was blindly immersed in her own world. When she thought of what that person said to her, she felt agitated for no reason. So what if the little crown princess was arrogant? Wasn't she still destined to be suppressed for the rest of her life? She didn't believe that this woman would still dare to be so arrogant after capturing her family members. Arbor continued to stare at her expressionlessly. After a while, he spat out a cold sentence. Hold down this woman's limbs and chop off her head. I want to let everyone know clearly. How dare you attack my family in Arbor? This is what you deserve. No, 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 no. Wang Liming crawled forward in a panic and screamed. Crown Princess, you can't do this. You can't. Take her down. Arbor pointed at Wang Liming and ordered. The purple forest guards immediately swarmed forward, grabbing the wailing Madame Jing and forcing her to kneel on the ground. Wang Liming's entire body was pressed down, and she barely managed to raise her head. Her lips trembled as she shouted, Crown Princess, you can't be this rude. The Panga clan has always been living in seclusion. You are trying to raise a war between the two clans by doing this. There will be no war. Arbor coldly interrupted her. He stared at her coldly and said word by word, all of you will die. Wang Liming's expression froze. She struggled with all her might and screamed, what right do you have to punish us? My husband is on his way back. You're such an unreasonable woman. What a vicious mind you have. Are you trying to make my husband declare war on the divine prefecture? Xiaomu looked at her disdainfully, before lightly raising her hand. Immediately, a purple forest guard stepped forward with a cold face, and held down Jing Minyao, who was struggling with all her might. At this moment, Jing Minyao finally felt a little afraid. She finally felt that the situation was not good. Chapter 34:12. She couldn't help but yell. Are you all dead? Come and save me. Do it. Following Jing Minyao's shouts, the sand field fell silent. No one made a sound. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. All the members of the Panga clan were now glaring at the willful third miss with fury. They had heard everything the crown princess of the divine land had said just now. If this brainless woman hadn't kidnapped someone else's sister, why would they have led their people to attack the Panga clan's territory? Damn it, she still had the face to order people around. Who would be willing to listen to her? Moreover, what the third young miss said just now had refreshed their opinion of the third young miss's stupidity. They didn't expect that there would be such a stupid person in the world, who was willing to stick her neck out for others. She clearly knew that the other party had thrown the crown princess's sister here for no good reason. But she was still stupid enough to take on this hot potato? Princess Jing was such a brilliant and intelligent woman. How could she have such a foolish and ignorant sister? Wang Liming hurriedly crawled forward and rushed to Reverend Jiang and Reverend Lan. She urged loudly, Reverend Jiang, Reverend Lan, you are the two reverends of the Panga clan. Master usually provides you with the best resources. Now that Minyao's life is at stake, you can't just stand by and watch. Reverend Jiang turned a deaf ear to Wang Liming's words. He even glanced at her and gave her a cold smile. Reverend Lan was a kinder person. He couldn't help but sigh. He signaled Wang Liming to look at their tied-up bodies. He smiled bitterly and said, It's useless, Madam Jing. Don't waste your time on us brothers. We are no match for the crown princess and her people. If you have the time, why don't you listen to your daughter's last words? Who are those people? The two old brothers simply couldn't see through the realms of the handsome red-clothed man and his companions beside the crown prince consort. With such a great disparity in strength, there was no way they could win. Madame Jing was really indulging in fantasy. As he spoke, Jing Minyao was already pinned to the ground by two purple forest guards. One of them drew a sword from his waist and looked at her coldly. Without saying a word, he slashed towards her head. Spare him! A deep voice came from the sky. Everybody raised their eyes, only to see Jing Ti, the chief of the Panga clan, returning with an old man whose hair and beard were all white. Jing Minyao was pressed to the ground and was trembling. When she saw the two of them, her eyes couldn't help but light up. Father, father! Grandpa Zhu, help me! Help me kill this little bitch, ah! A purple forest guard viciously smacked her on the head, causing her to fall heavily onto the sandy ground. She choked on a mouthful of hot sand, causing her to cough repeatedly. Who are you? Quickly release Min Min. That elderly man that Jing Minyao called Grandpa Zhu berated with a cold frown and a furious glare. His entire body's suppression suddenly dispersed as he charged straight for Qiao Mu. Ma Shurchen, who had been waving her small fan and watching the show with a smile, suddenly turned cold. In a flash, she arrived at Arbor's side. She opened her fan and lightly waved it. A sharp, cold light shot towards the old man. What a shameless old thing. How dare you bully my Jojo? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal coldly scolded. Chapter 34:13. He pointed at the old man and sent out a beam of saint power that rushed toward the old man whose expression had changed slightly. The old man took a deep breath and shouted, Who are you? He hurriedly pulled out a saber from his conscience and held it in front of his chest. The moment the two collided, a surging force hit the back of the old man's saber. The collision caused his chest to tighten slightly, and his entire body to stumble back over a dozen steps before he managed to stabilize his body. The old man's expression changed. Jing Zai, the Panga clan leader, also had a sharp look in his eyes. There was a hint of disbelief in his cold, electric eyes. He was too surprised. He knew Elder Zhu's strength better than anyone else. He was at the peak of the spiritual supreme realm, and a transcendent god realm expert. But now this young man, who looked to be in his early 20s, had pushed him back a few steps with one finger? What was going on? Why was his opponent's cultivation level higher than Elder Zhu's? Xiaomu blinked, a cold glint in her eyes. She gazed at the old man across from her, and said after a while, "You're so shameless." Elder Zhu's face flushed red. He stared at Arbor with gloomy eyes. If looks could kill, Lord Jojo would have been killed by this old man many times. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but look back at the little girl. He raised his hand and patted her little head. "Jojo, how do you think we should deal with this old man?" Arbor said expressionlessly, "He's a hindrance." "Then let me kill him." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal laughed. He moved his finger, and a natal divine sword appeared in his palm. Without a word, he waved a beam of sword light at Elder Zhu. Elder Zhu's expression changed again. As he opened his defensive spiritual weapon, he grabbed the saber and rushed forward. The two of them soared into the sky and exchanged several blows in an instant. Elder Zhu was no match for them. Blood trickled out of his mouth, and he was shocked. Jingzong was also secretly anxious. After all, from the looks of it, Elder Zhu wasn't a match for the beautiful man in red beside the crown princess. As time passed, Elder Zhu from his side would definitely lose. Jing Zha was anxious to save his daughter. He glanced at Jing Minyao, who was pressed on the ground, and then turned to Arbor. "Crown Princess, I beg you to have your men stop immediately. The 100,000 soldiers that I brought back with me have already surrounded this place. You can release your spiritual sense and take a good look to see if I'm lying to you or not." Little Tai Sui's body moved, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Jing Zha. He leaped up and grabbed Jing Zha's neck. While Jing Ting was retreating, countless bodyguards around him rushed forward to protect him. Little Tai Sui smacked several people in a row, and in just a few minutes, it had arrived in front of Jing Ting. "Even if I, Jing Ting, am captured by you, I will fight until the last moment. Even if there is only one soldier left, without my order, the 100,000 soldiers of the Panga clan will fight you to the death." Xiaomu coldly stared at clan head Jing Ting and snorted. "You probably aren't a fool, are you?" As he spoke, roars of fighting could be heard from outside the camp. Jing Ting's expression changed. He tried his best to calm his mind. Just as he was about to use his spiritual sense to check what was happening outside, he heard an extremely cold voice. "Clan leader Jing, let me give you a piece of advice. Tell them to surrender immediately. Otherwise die." Chapter 34:14. At this moment, all the hot blood in Jing Zhui's heart receded. The blood in his body almost turned into ice and snow, as if it was about to freeze inside his body. He was so cold that his teeth were chattering. He really didn't expect this at all. The crown prince of the divine province had also rushed over, and from the looks of it, he had brought an army. Jing Zhui closed his eyes slightly. The thought of exhausting the little crown princess with the advantage of numbers suddenly disappeared without a trace. "Clan leader Jing, are you going to sacrifice so many of our clansmen for your daughter?" A Panga woman couldn't help but stand up and scream at Jing Zhui. "Jing Minyao is such a jinx. How many people is she going to kill?" "Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao!" A voice rang out. The Panga clansmen all said the same thing at the same time. Their voices soared into the sky and stretched for thousands of miles. Wang Liming waved her hands with a pale face and roared at the crowd. "Are you even human? You can't be so selfish. You can't let my daughter die just to appease the crown princess's anger. Kill Jing Minyao! Kill Jing Minyao!" The roars rose and fell one after another without any intention of stopping. Some of the Panga clansmen were even about to rush forward with knives, wanting to kill Jing Minyao on the spot to claim the credit. Jing Zhui signaled with his eyes, and two guards immediately ran over and beat the two Panga clansmen who wanted to attack Jing Minyao to the ground. Wang Liming's face grew paler and paler. She hurriedly turned back to look at clan leader Jing. "Master, what should we do?" Jing Zhui's heart was also cold. He didn't expect that the first to betray him would be his clansmen. They must have been scared to death by the little crown princess, right? That was why they wanted to use Jing Minyao's death to end this war. It wasn't that they were wrong, but Jing Zhui felt extremely indignant. Since when had he, Jing Mao, been forced into such a state. Clan leader Jing, do you want to continue fighting or execute your daughter to protect yourself and your people? You have to choose quickly, Arbor said coldly. Your people outside can't wait for your decision. The sounds of fighting outside the camp grew louder and louder. Jing Ting held his breath as he heard a series of arrows being fired. A lot of members of the Panga clan must have been killed or wounded outside. Bang! The door of the camp that was wrapped in vines was kicked open by someone. Everyone looked up and saw a handsome man clad in pitch-black divine armor. He kicked open the door of the two corpses beside him and walked in quickly with a frosty expression on his face. He raised his phoenix eyes and looked coldly at Jingjia. His words were clear and cold. Does clan leader Jing want to fight with this crown prince? The blood sea of hell is waiting for you to cross it. Emolian stared at him coldly. Her voice was emotionless and cold. The bones on the ground are your future. Jing Jue couldn't help but cry out. Your Highness, the Panga clan has no intention of being the enemy of the divine land. I'm willing to hand over my daughter and the culprit. You can punish her however you want. Bang! Elder Zhu fell from the sky, but he didn't land safely. Instead, he was kicked down from the sky and hit the ground hard. His head was bleeding. Chapter 34:15. Jing Minyao's eyes widened as she turned to her father in disbelief. These words actually came from her father, who had always doted on her? Why? How did the situation turn out like this? Shouldn't her father be here to save her? Even Elder Zhu, who was at the transcendent realm, was knocked to the ground. Seeing him climb up with a defeated expression, Jing Minyao felt a bone-chilling coldness in her chest. Was she being abandoned by her father? No, this couldn't be real. She must still be in a dream, and hadn't fully woken up. Jing Minyao's eyes were bloodshot as she looked anxiously at her father, Jing Jue. She screamed, Father, 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 you can't do this. Master. Madame Jing also cried as she rushed over. She knelt at Jing Jue's feet and gripped his robe tightly as she cried. Master, master, I beg you. Minmin was just confused for a moment and made such a mistake. She knows her mistake now. She knows her mistake, master. Please give her one more chance. Just give her one more chance. Madame Jing cried out in a heart-wrenching manner. Jing Jue looked at his daughter who was covered in blood and was in a sorry state. Naturally, he felt very uncomfortable. This daughter used to be the daughter that he valued and loved the most. Compared to his coldness and sternness towards his eldest daughter, Jing Jue was completely devoted to his youngest daughter. He was really afraid that she would fall in his hands and melt in his mouth. Usually, he would give her whatever she wanted and dote on her with all his might. However, in the end, was he going to personally send her to her death? Now, facing the Crown Prince's army in the Aurora Desert, and facing the Crown Princess' aggression, Jing Jue was helpless. He turned to look at Arbor, and saw the latter looking at him coldly. There was no room for negotiation. Jing Jue sighed and lowered his head to Madame Jing. Madam, let go. No, I won't let go. I won't let go. Madame Jing screamed. Minmin is my daughter. I won't leave her to die. Jing Jue, she's your daughter too. Are you willing to send your own daughter to her death, just to appease the Crown Princess? He couldn't accept it. Jingjia's eyes turned red too. But what could he do if he didn't want to? Can you change the current situation just because you're unwilling? He could either execute Jing Minyao, or drag the entire clan down with him. These were the two paths before him. No matter what choice he made, he still felt extremely uncomfortable. Old master! Madame Jing screamed and turned to glare at Arbor. Crown Princess! Your sister is completely fine right now. Why do you have to be so overbearing, and want my Min to die? Xiaomu gazed coldly at this unreasonable woman in front of her, and ruthlessly slapped her across the face from a distance. My sister is fine now, but it's not because you were merciful to her. It's because she was lucky, Arbor said coldly. Furthermore, was Xiaolina really alright? She was hit in the chest and her organs were injured. If she hadn't appeared in time to help, it would have been worse. Even if she was cured in the future, there would be repercussions. Crown Prince Consort, you're twisting words and forcing logic by saying this. Madame Jing's voice was very shrill as she turned around and crawled to Emolien's feet. Chapter 34:16. Madame Jing cried miserably. Your Highness, please have mercy and save Min Min's life. Isn't it unfair for the Crown Princess to do this? Is it completely reasonable for her to do this? Prince Emo looked at her coldly. It was this cold look that made Madame Jing feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. The Crown Prince didn't care about the life and death of the mother and daughter at all. That's right. If the Crown Prince had any pity for Min Min, he wouldn't have led the army to attack the Panga clan. Min Min must be blind to fall in love with someone like you. Madame Jing's anger exploded in an instant. She cursed fiercely, her eyes glaring at him, as if she wanted to eat him up. At this moment, she was indeed very angry. If Min Min hadn't been bewitched by Jing Linyao, and fell in love with the Crown Prince wholeheartedly, and wanted to replace Jing Linyao as the Crown Princess of the Divine Land, how could there have been so many subsequent incidents? She hated Jing Linyao, but now she hated this cold and heartless Crown Prince even more. Impudent! The purple forest guard suddenly drew his sword and pressed it against Madame Jing's neck. His eyes were filled with anger, as if the woman in front of him had tarnished the supreme deity in their hearts. How dare you be so rude to the Crown Prince? Do you want to die? Xiaomu also narrowed her eyes and very rudely scolded back. You're so shameless. Who asked your daughter to like Jojo's lotus? Scram scram scram. Who allowed your daughter to like Jojo's lotus? What a ridiculous woman. Was she born with no brains? Emolian blinked, and he cheerfully strode to his wifey's side. He reached out to grasp her small hand and said with a nod and a smile, Xiao Xiao, don't get angry over this kind of idiot. After we settle the matter here, we'll go for a stroll around Clear Pass City. Xiaomu turned to look at him, and nodded her small head. Just now, he was really angered by Wang Limeng. She didn't know what nonsense she was talking about, as if it was Lian's fortune to be liked by her daughter. In fact, Jojo's lotus didn't know this Jing Minyao at all. She hadn't even interacted with this woman twice. Moreover, even if he had seen her, he would only glance at her coldly from afar. He would not even spare her a glance. She really didn't know how this crazy woman could blame Jojo's lotus for not knowing how to educate her own daughter. Mrs. Jing was stopped by the sword, but she was still shrieking and making a scene because she loved her daughter dearly. The Divine Land is indeed powerful, but the Panga clan is not a pushover, either. If you really want to force my Min Min to death, I will fight you to the death. Neither of us, Your Highness Crown Princess, please don't lower yourself to her level. Jingja interrupted Madame Jing's words. He then cupped his hands toward Arbor, and glanced at the guards standing at the side. Why aren't you dragging Madame away? Jingja shouted angrily. Don't you think you've caused enough trouble? Did they not see that all the members of the Panga clan were staring at her in disgust when they heard that she was going to fight to the death? No one would accompany her to her death, because no one wanted to die. Why should they throw away their lives for a Jing Minyao? She Jing Minyao still wanted them to risk their lives for her stupidity and arrogance. Chapter 34:17. Ha, what a joke! Jing Jue frowned. He glanced at the unfriendly faces of his clansmen, and sighed heavily in his heart. If his wife continued to be so willful, even he, the clan leader, would lose a lot of people's support. By then, it would be even more difficult to win back the hearts of his clansmen. Let go. Let go of me. Madame Jing screamed and struggled with all her might. She turned around and glared at her husband viciously. She couldn't help but curse. Jing Jue, you useless man. You don't even care about your own wife and daughter. Jing Jue, don't forget what you promised me back then. You promised me that you would take good care of Min Min and me. Jing Jue. Clan leader Jing narrowed his eyes and looked at Madame Jing coldly. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched indifferently as his clansmen tied up Madame Jing and dragged her away. Madame Jing's screams echoed in the air and lingered for a long time. She was like a plucked pheasant that let out a series of sharp screams before it died. Xiaomu reflexively furrowed her brows. Her screams had clearly pierced her ears and made her feel very uncomfortable. Clan leader Jing. Mo Lian looked back at Jing Jia and asked coldly, You can start dealing with her now, right? Jing Jue's 5 fingers clenched tightly. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. It was so heavy that he couldn't speak. Father! Father! Jing Minyao screamed anxiously. Her eyes were filled with a strong desire to live. She knew fear now. She knew that although she was the third daughter of the Panga clan, she was still nothing in front of the crown prince and the crown princess of the divine land. If others were to pinch her to death, it would be like pinching a weak little ant to death. They could casually stretch out a hand and lightly press down, and she would be deader than dead. Clan leader Jing? Mo Lian reminded him impatiently. Jing Jue's face was heavy. Finally, he nodded silently. Guards. Immediately, 2 members of the Panga clan walked forward, each holding a sharp dagger. Jing Minyao's pupils shrank. She couldn't help but tremble violently. That terrifying memory once again drowned her like an avalanche. She couldn't help but tremble. She remembered the day Arbor had cut her neck with a dagger. She thought of the terrible pain when she was reborn. The pain where she could neither live nor die. She thought of the painful days after she came back from the dead. Her limbs were weak and she couldn't move. She couldn't eat anything, and could only drink liquids. She also thought about how she had tried her best to grow and strengthen herself, but it had been so difficult. She had finally used a secret technique to raise herself to a level 3 god tier master. But in the eyes of others, she was still just an ant. She hated it. He hated them so much that he couldn't extricate himself. He hated them so much that he wanted to devour everyone in front of him. They were her father, her mother, her sisters, and her clansmen. However, none of them stood by her side, and none of them were willing to help her. Jing Minyao let out a shrill scream. She was forced to kneel on the ground. Her eyes were red. She shook her head and cried bitterly. Father, father, I know I was wrong. Don't kill me, father. Father. Chapter 34:18. Jing Zai naturally closed his eyes in extreme pain. But the hatred in his heart towards the young couple in front of him could not be stopped. If there was a chance in the future, Jing Jue secretly suppressed the hatred in his heart and turned his head to look into the distance. He could not bear to look at his daughter again. Seeing her father like this, Jing Minyao knew that this coward had completely given up on her. To put it nicely, he was doing it for the lives of the entire clan. To put it bluntly, he was doing it for his own future in life. In his eyes, no one was more important than her. Jing Minyao gritted her teeth in hatred. She suddenly raised her head and slapped a clansman in the abdomen, sending him flying. The dagger also fell to the ground with a clang. Jing Jue suddenly turned his face to look at her. His eyes were cold. Just as he was about to explode, he heard a clansman cry out in horror. Not good. The earth tornado is coming. The earth tornado was the most fatal disaster in the Aurora Desert. Looking from afar, the entire desert was blown up by a gust of wind, raising a tornado that went straight between the sky and the earth. The earth tornado moved so fast that it almost swept through the entire camp in the blink of an eye. The crowd was suddenly in chaos. Arbor reacted quickly. She first ordered Sapling to take back the little sand scorpion, the fiery evil mosquito, and the explosive bird. Looking at the members of the Panga clan, who were wailing in despair inside the earth tornadoes, Xiao Mu unexpectedly frowned. She suddenly threw away the storage talisman in her hand and took the old, weak, women and children into it. This was only temporary. There were at least tens of thousands of old, weak women and children here. A purple storage talisman was more than enough, but it was a little cramped in comparison. She had to save her own life first. While Arbor was doing this, her small body had already been carried away by Mo Lian. The group hid in the defensive barrier set up by the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, Little Tai Sui, and the others, so they were not oppressed by the earth tornado for the time being. Separated by the transparent defensive boundary, Xiao Mu curiously gazed at the earth tornadoes wreaking havoc outside. For a moment, he didn't have the time to pay attention to Jing Minyao, who had fallen to the ground. Her entire body was twisted and turned by the earth tornado as she bumped into the wind. Jing Minyao was blown into the sky by the earth tornado. She landed on the sand with a thud and choked on a mouthful of sand. Her face turned red and she coughed violently. She hurriedly calmed herself down and created a defensive barrier against the wind. Unfortunately, Her defensive barrier was only halfway up when she felt a surge of power behind her, hitting her in the back and sending her flying several meters away. Little Tai Sui narrowed its eyes and put down its hand. As Jing Minyao spat out a mouthful of blood, her body was once again swept up by the earth tornado and thrown into the sky. Arbor finally saw Jing Minyao's figure clearly. She was tossing about in the sky. The earth tornado tore her apart, and Arbor only saw a rain of blood sprinkling down. Jing Minyao was thrown to the ground and smashed out a big pit. Cough, cough, cough. Jing Minyao fell to the sand and was horrified to find that one of her arms had been removed by the earth tornado. Like a pitiful insect, she struggled to crawl on the ground, shaking her body as she crawled toward the feet of the Jing family head. Father, save me, father, save me. She reached out and grabbed his robes, her other hand tugging at him as she begged him bitterly. The Jing family head closed his eyes. This daughter of his had lost an arm and was completely useless. Chapter 34:19. But to let her die like this, it seemed a bit reluctant. Jing Jia lowered his head and glanced at Jing Minyao's severed arm. Just as he was about to reach out and help her up, the earth tornado suddenly swept over again and slammed into the defensive wall he had built. Jing Jia had no choice but to use his hand to push Jing Minyao away and quickly stabilize himself. At the same time, Jing Minyao was once again swept up by the violent earth tornado, flying high into the sky with a whoosh. Jing Minyao's eyes bulged as she cried out in alarm. Father! Ah! The earth tornado seemed to have gone crazy, rolling Jing Minyao up and down in the sky, constantly jolting her up and down. It kept tossing her around until she wished she could lower her head and vomit. But she was in the air and had just been hit by someone else. Not only was her internal energy in a mess, she couldn't even generate the strength to open her defensive barrier. Arbor turned his head to look at little Tai Sui. That child's movements were too fast. He slapped Jing Minyao's back and immediately slapped her into the earth tornado. Then he turned around as if nothing had happened, but this time, Jing Minyao could only blame her bad luck for being swept into the earth tornado. Little Tai Sui didn't attack her again. It was as if the earth tornado had its eyes on her and wanted to sweep her up into the sky, but it made sense. On this sandy land, besides Jojo's group, there were only Jing Minyao, clan head Jing, and other personal guards. The rest of the old, weak, women, and children had all been thrown into the storage talisman by Arbor. Jing Minyao was now wandering in the sky, tossed up and down by the earth tornado again and again. Several times, it seemed like she was going to fall, but in the end she didn't fall. Wang Liming's hair was disheveled as she struggled to break free from clan head Jing's personal guards. She rushed forward and wailed, "Ah, Min Min, my Min Min." She rushed to Jing Jia, wanting to reach out and shake his body, but Jing Jia's defensive barrier blocked her outside. Madame Jing looked at him absent-mindedly and couldn't help but cry. Clan head, please save Min Min, my daughter. My poor daughter." At this time, Jing Qiao also hurried to catch up with her mother. She pretended to shed 2 drops of tears. "Mother, don't be sad. Min Min is blessed by the heavens. She will definitely be fine." "How could he be fine?" Wang Liming turned around and glared at Jing Qiao. She couldn't help but scold. "You make it sound so simple. How could he be fine? Can't you see that your sister is bouncing back and forth in the sky? That damned earth tornado, why did it target her Min Min? Why didn't he roll anyone else but her Min Min to play with?" This made Wang Liming furious, but there was nothing she could do to help. Looking at her Min Min suffering in the air, Wang Liming felt like her heart was about to bleed. "Min Min, my Min Min," Wang Liming cried. "Mother." Jing Qiao hated that she couldn't grind her teeth. They were both her mother's biological daughters, but her mother treated her so differently. Usually, she was only good to Min Min and never cared about her biological daughter. It was fine if her mother wasn't close to her eldest sister. After all, her eldest sister wasn't her biological daughter. But she was different from her eldest sister. She was also her mother's biological daughter, okay? Why was it that ever since she was born, she had always been despised by her mother? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.